My junior coworker got a 42,000 retention bonus. I got 45, and my wife's father told me to appreciate the gesture. That night, hackers attacked our systems at 3 a.m. I didn't say a word. By morning, the email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, nestled between a thread about printer maintenance and someone's farewell announcement. Subject line: retention bonus notification, confidential. I remembered the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, waiting for Miranda Chen to finish her presentation about Q3 projections so I could slip out early for once. My daughter Lily had a piano recital at 6, and I'd promised, really promised this time, that I'd be there before they dimmed the lights. I clicked the email without thinking. The way you touch a door handle you've touched 1,000 times before. Dear Michael Torres, in recognition of your continued dedication and the successful completion of the Fortress Migration Project, we are pleased to award you a retention bonus in the amount of $4,500 before taxes. This bonus reflects our appreciation for your 8 years of service and expertise in systems architecture. $4,500. I read it twice, then 3 times. The words didn't change. The comma didn't magically shift one place to the right. Around me, the open office hummed with its usual late afternoon energy, keyboards clicking like tired crickets, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room, someone laughing at a video with their headphones slightly too loud. Everything normal, everything the same as it had been 10 seconds ago, except now, there was this thing sitting in my chest, heavy and cold like I'd swallowed a stone. The Fortress Migration Project. 6 months of my life. 6 months of 3 a.m. emergency calls, of explaining to Lily why Daddy couldn't make it to her soccer games, of Emma falling asleep on the couch waiting for me to come home. 6 months of rebuilding our entire security infrastructure from the ground up, of training the new hires, of being the one person in the building who understood every layer of our defenses because I'd architected every single one of them. 495. I closed my laptop slowly, methodically, the way you close a book when you want to remember exactly where you stopped reading. Miranda was still talking, her laser pointer dancing across pie charts that suddenly seemed very far away. I stood up, collected my things, walked to the elevator with my messenger bag slung over my shoulder, and my face arranged into what I hoped looked like a normal expression, the kind of expression that doesn't invite questions. I made it to Lily's recital with 11 minutes to spare. She played Claire de Lune, her small fingers finding each note with the careful precision of a child who'd practiced something 100 times. Emma sat beside me, her hand finding mine in the darkness, squeezing once. I squeezed back and tried to focus on the music, on the way Lily's brow furrowed in concentration, on anything except the number that kept scrolling through my mind like a broken ticker tape. $4,500. $4,500. $4,500. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Jordan Mills practically bouncing in his ergonomic chair. Jordan, who'd been with the company for 18 months. Jordan, who I'd personally trained on every system we used. Jordan, who still occasionally called me with questions about basic configurations I'd explained to him a dozen times. "Dude," he said, swiveling toward me with the kind of grin that takes up his entire face. "Did you see? Did you get the email?" I set my coffee down carefully on my desk, a ritual I'd perfected over 8 years, the exact placement that kept the cup away from my keyboard, but within easy reach. "Yeah," I said. "I got it." $42,000, man. 42,000. He actually laughed, a sound of pure disbelief and joy. "I'm taking Sarah to Belize. We're going to stay at one of those overwater bungalow things. I've been looking at flights all morning." The number hung in the air between us like something physical. I could almost see it, could almost reach out and touch the nearly 10 times difference between his bonus and mine. $42,000 for 18 months of work, $4,500 for 8 years. "That's great, Jordan," I heard myself say. "You guys will love Belize." And here's the thing. I meant it. Jordan was a good kid, enthusiastic, eager to learn, genuinely talented once you pointed him in the right direction. This wasn't about Jordan. Jordan didn't set the bonus amounts. Jordan didn't decide that the junior architect who'd helped implement someone else's design deserved nearly 10 times what the senior architect who'd created that design received. But Jordan got to be happy about his $42,000, and I got to smile and nod and go back to my desk and open my task list and pretend that something fundamental hadn't just shifted in the architecture of my understanding. I didn't tell Emma right away. Not that night, anyway. We had dinner, tacos, Lily's favorite, and she talked about her science project on renewable energy, about how solar panels work, about how she wanted to put them on every house in the world. Emma asked about my day, with that particular inflection that meant she could tell something was off, but wasn't sure if she should press. I said something vague about meetings and deadlines, kissed them both goodnight, and went to my home office. The thing about system architecture is that it's fundamentally about understanding how pieces fit together, how data flows from one point to another, how to protect that flow, how to monitor it, how to control who has access to what and when. It's about seeing the invisible structure that holds everything together, the scaffold behind the facade. I'd built our scaffold. Every firewall rule, every access protocol, every failsafe and backup system, I knew them the way you know the rooms of your own house in the dark. I could navigate them blind. I sat in my office in the blue glow of my monitors, and I didn't do anything. I just sat there thinking about numbers and effort and value and recognition, about what it means when a company tells you, in the most quantifiable way possible, exactly what it thinks you're worth. Around midnight, Emma appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her gray robe, hair pulled back in the loose bun she wore to sleep. "You're doing that thing," she said softly. "What thing?" "That thing where you're very quiet and very still, and I can practically hear you thinking from the other room." She came in, perched on the edge of my desk. "What happened?" So I told her about the email, about the $4,500, about Jordan and his $42,000 and his overwater bungalow in Belize. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the wood of the desk, a habit she had when she was processing something that made her angry. "That's bullshit," she finally said, with the kind of quiet intensity that was somehow more powerful than shouting. "That's complete bullshit, Mike." "Yeah. You're going to talk to Henderson, right? HR or someone?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" Her voice rose slightly. "You can't just... You deserve better than this. You know you deserve better than this." I did know. That was the problem. I knew exactly what I deserved, what I'd earned, what my contributions had been worth. And I'd just been told, in the clearest possible terms, that the company I'd given 8 years of my life to had a very different calculation. Thursday night was dinner at Emma's parents' house, a weekly tradition I'd normally enjoy. Her mother, Clara's cooking was legendary, her father, David's wine collection extensive and freely shared. But that particular Thursday, I felt like I was walking into a minefield in dress shoes. We were halfway through the main course, Clara's famous coq au vin, which I barely tasted, when Emma brought it up. I'd asked her not to. We'd had a whole conversation about it in the car on the way over, about how I wanted to handle this myself, about how I didn't need her parents involved in my career grievances. She'd agreed. She'd nodded and said okay, and squeezed my hand. But somewhere between the salad course and the wine refills, I watched her reach her limit. "Dad," she said, setting down her fork with deliberate care, "Mike got screwed over by his company this week." David looked up, his reading glasses perched on his nose, even though we were at dinner, a habit that drove Clara crazy. He was a senior partner at a law firm downtown, the kind of man who'd spent 40 years learning to read people and situations with surgical precision. "Oh," he said mildly. What happened? Emma laid it out. The retention bonus. The $40,500 versus $42,000. The 8 years versus 18 months. The Fortress migration project and everything I'd sacrificed for it. She was clinical about it, presenting facts the way she'd learned from watching him. But I could hear the anger underneath, tight and controlled. David listened without interrupting, swirling his wine occasionally, his expression giving nothing away. When Emma finished, he was quiet for a moment, considering. That does sound frustrating, he said finally. Though I'm not sure we have the full picture. Companies have complex compensation structures. There are often factors we don't see from our individual positions. Market adjustments, retention risk assessments, budget allocations by department. Dad, I'm not saying it's fair, Emma. I'm saying there's likely context we're missing. He turned to me, his expression kind but firm, the way you'd talk to someone who needed gentle correction. Mike, I understand you're disappointed, but $4,500 is nothing to sneeze at. In this economy, with the way tech companies are doing layoffs left and right, you should appreciate the gesture. Some people are getting nothing. Some people are getting pink slips. Appreciate the gesture. 4 words, 8 syllables, delivered with the patient condescension of someone who'd never worried about whether his contributions were valued, never had to wonder if the people he'd trained were being compensated 10 times what he was for a 10th of the work. Emma's face flushed red. Dad, that's not... I'm just offering perspective, David continued smoothly. Sometimes we get so focused on what we think we deserve that we lose sight of what we actually have. A job, a salary, a bonus, even a small one. Those are blessings, especially right now. Clara tried to change the subject, asking Lily about school, but the rest of dinner passed in a fog. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, nodded when I was supposed to nod, and excused myself early to help Lily with her homework in David's study. In the car on the way home, Emma was furious. I can't believe he said that. Appreciate the gesture. Like you should be grateful for scraps. Like you didn't earn every penny of what Jordan got and more. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. It's not fine. None of this is fine. She was right, of course. But what was I supposed to do? March into Henderson's office and demand an explanation? File a complaint with HR about how my bonus didn't match my junior colleagues? Write a strongly worded email about my disappointment in the company's compensation decisions? The truth was, I didn't know what to do, so I did what I'd been doing all week. I went to work, I did my job, I maintained the systems I'd built, and I tried not to think too hard about the arithmetic of my worth. Friday afternoon, Henderson called me into his office. Robert Henderson, VP of IT Operations, my direct supervisor for the past 3 years. He was a good manager by most measures, fair, responsive, generally supportive of his team. We'd always had a solid working relationship. Mike, come in, close the door. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, already looking uncomfortable. I wanted to touch base about the retention bonuses. Okay, I said neutrally. I know the amount might have been less than you expected. He shifted in his chair, straightened a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. I want you to understand, these decisions came from above my pay grade. Finance and executive leadership set the budget allocations. I went to bat for you, Mike. I really did. But there were constraints, and the final numbers weren't up to me. I understand, I said, because what else was there to say? You're a valuable member of this team. Critical, actually. The work you did on Fortress. It's the foundation of our security posture going forward. Everyone knows that. Everyone appreciates it. Appreciation. That word again. The thing is, Henderson continued, leaning forward with his hands clasped on the desk, Jordan's situation is a bit different. He had another offer. Did you know that? Tech startup, aggressive recruiting, nearly double his current salary. We were at serious risk of losing him, and with the hiring freeze, we couldn't afford that gap in coverage. So the retention bonus in his case was more of a strategic necessity. And there it was, the logic that made perfect sense from a business perspective and no sense at all from any other angle. Jordan got $42,000 because he was ready to leave. I got $4,500 because I'd stayed. Loyalty apparently was its own reward, and that reward was worth exactly $4,500. Makes sense, I said, standing up. Is there anything else? Henderson looked like he wanted to say more, but whatever it was, he swallowed it. No, that's all. Thanks for understanding, Mike. I walked back to my desk in a haze, sat down, stared at my monitors. 3 screens full of system logs, network diagrams, security protocols. The invisible architecture of everything the company did, everything it was, all the data and communications and transactions that made it function. All of it running on systems I'd designed. All of it protected by defenses I'd architected. All of it worth, apparently, $4,500 of appreciation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Emma was breathing softly beside me, Lily safely asleep down the hall, and I was staring at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about value and worth and the strange mathematics of corporate gratitude. My phone was on the nightstand, work email disabled after 10 p.m. per Emma's rule, but my laptop was in my office, and my credentials, all of them, were memorized. I thought about the fortress system, about the elegant redundancies I'd built into it, the multiple layers of defense, the monitoring systems that watch for threats in real time. I thought about the emergency protocols, the escalation procedures, the exact chain of actions that would happen if someone tried to breach our perimeter. I thought about the fact that I was the only person in the company who truly understood all of it. Jordan knew pieces, the rest of the team knew pieces, but the complete picture, the full architecture, the way all the components work together, that existed in exactly one place. My head. At 2:47 a.m., my phone lit up with an alert I'd disabled after hours. System breach detected. Level 5 threat. All hands emergency. I picked up the phone, looked at the screen, felt Emma stir beside me. "What is it?" she mumbled, still half asleep. "Nothing," I said quietly, setting the phone face down on the nightstand. "Just a spam notification. Go back to sleep." She made a soft sound of acknowledgement and rolled over. The phone buzzed again, then again. Emergency escalation protocol activating. Then a call coming through. Henderson's number. I silenced it. Then I turned the phone completely off, set it back on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. "Appreciate the gesture," David had said. So I did. By morning, the world would be very different. But right then, in the darkness of my bedroom, I didn't say a word. I just lay there, listening to Emma breathe, counting the seconds between my heartbeats, and waiting for the sun to rise on whatever came next. Dawn came like it always does, indifferent to human drama, methodical in its transformation of darkness into light. I woke at 6:15 a.m. to the sound of my alarm, the one I'd used for 8 years, a soft chime that gradually increased in volume. Emma was already up, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Lily's backpack sat by the front door, ready for school. Everything normal, everything the same as it had been yesterday and the day before, and the day before that. Except my phone. I turned it on while the shower warmed up, watching the screen light up with the kind of notification cascade that usually meant something catastrophic. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 19 voicemails. The most recent call had come in at 5:52 a.m. Henderson again, his 5th attempt since 3 a.m. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they'd say. Instead, I showered, dressed in my usual Friday casual, dark jeans, button down, the comfortable blazer Emma had bought me last Christmas. I made it to the kitchen in time to kiss Lily goodbye before Emma drove her to school, poured myself coffee, added the exact amount of cream I always added, and checked the news on my tablet while I ate toast. The breach hadn't made headlines yet. It would, probably by afternoon, but corporate security incidents took time to become public knowledge. There would be statements to prepare, PR to coordinate, legal to consult. For now, it was still internal, a problem contained within the walls of one mid-sized tech company in a city full of mid-sized tech companies, all of them dealing with their own problems. My phone rang again. Henderson. I let it go to voicemail. Emma came back into the kitchen, keys jangling in her hand, and stopped when she saw me sitting there calmly drinking coffee. "Aren't you going in?" she asked, checking her watch. "It's almost 7:30. "I'll head in soon," I said, finishing breakfast first. She looked at my phone, face down on the table, then back at me. That particular expression she got sometimes, the one that meant she was reading between lines I hadn't even written yet. "Mike," she said slowly. "What's going on?" "Nothing, just not rushing in today." "You never rush in anyway. You leave at 7:20 every morning. It's 7:29. I took another sip of coffee. "Maybe I'm starting a new routine." She stood there for a moment longer, uncertainty flickering across her face, then grabbed her own coffee mug and sat down across from me. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. Your phone has been vibrating non-stop since I got back from Lily's school. That's not nothing." "Work stuff," I said. "It can wait." Can it? Could it? That was the question, wasn't it? For 8 years, nothing at work could wait. Every alert, every call, every emergency. I dropped everything. Birthday dinners interrupted. Weekend plans canceled. Vacation time spent on my laptop in hotel rooms. Emma and Lily at the beach while I debugged systems from a rented condo. 8 years of treating every work crisis like it was life or death, because that's what you did when you were the one person who could fix things. 8 years of being indispensable. And my reward for that indispensability was $45 and a suggestion to appreciate the gesture. "Yeah," I said finally. "It can wait." I arrived at the office at 9:47 a.m., nearly 2.5 hours later than usual. The parking lot was already full, which was unusual for a Friday. Most people worked from home at least one day a week. Through the glass doors, I could see unusual activity in the lobby. People clustered in groups, voices raised, the kind of controlled chaos that happened when something had gone seriously wrong. The security guard at the front desk, Marcus, who I'd chatted with 1,000 times about his grandson's baseball team, looked at me like I'd risen from the dead. "Mr. Torres," he said, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. "They've been trying to reach you all night. Mr. Henderson said to send you straight up the moment you arrived." "Thanks, Marcus," I said, scanning my badge with the same motion I'd used every workday for 8 years. "How's Tyler doing? Still hitting home runs?" He blinked at me, confused by the normalcy of the question in the midst of whatever crisis was unfolding upstairs. Yeah, he is. Mr. Torres, you should really—" "I'll head right up," I said and took the elevator. The third floor, where 8 operations lived, looked like someone had kicked an anthill. People rushing between cubicles, voices overlapping. The conference room packed with bodies. I could see through the glass walls. Jordan saw me first, his face cycling through relief, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. He practically ran across the floor. "Mike, Jesus Christ, where have you been? We've been calling you since 3 in the morning. "Phone died," I lied smoothly. "Forgot to charge it last night. What's going on?" "What's going on? What's—" He looked around as if checking whether this was some kind of joke. "We got hit. Last night, 3:14 a.m. Someone breached the perimeter, got past the first 2 firewall layers, started pulling data. It's bad, Mike. It's really bad." I set my bag down at my desk, logged into my computer with the methodical calm of someone checking email on a normal Friday morning. "How bad?" We don't know yet. That's the problem. We can't figure out what they accessed or how deep they got. The logs are... the logs are a mess. Nothing makes sense. It's like they knew exactly where to hit us to cause maximum confusion. Huh, I said. That is bad. Henderson's losing his mind. We've got external consultants coming in at noon, executive leadership breathing down everyone's neck, and you're our lead architect. You built these systems. We need you to tell us what happened and how to fix it. Behind Jordan, I could see Henderson emerging from the conference room, his face the color of old paper. His tie loosened, something I'd never seen before. He spotted me, and his expression did something complicated, cycling through relief and anger and desperation all at once. "Torres," he shouted across the floor, loud enough the conversation stopped. "My office, now." I stood up slowly, took my coffee mug, still half full from my leisurely breakfast, and walked across the floor with the measured pace of someone who had nowhere more important to be. Every eye in the department followed me. I could feel their confusion, their disbelief at my calm. This wasn't how I usually responded to crises. Usually I was the first one in, the last one out, running on coffee and adrenaline and the fierce satisfaction of solving impossible problems. But that Michael Torres, the one who'd built these systems and defended them like they were his children, who'd sacrificed weekends and evenings and family time to keep everything running perfectly, that person had been worth $4,500. This Michael Torres, the one walking calmly into Henderson's office while the company burned around him, was still figuring out what he was worth. Henderson's office looked like a disaster zone. Coffee cups scattered across the desk, papers everywhere. His laptop surrounded by 3 other screens pulled in from various conference rooms. 2 other people I didn't recognize sat in the corner, external consultants probably brought in at obscene hourly rates to fix problems I could solve in my sleep. "Where the hell have you been?" Henderson didn't shout, but his voice had the kind of quiet intensity that was somehow worse. "Do you have any idea what's been happening? We've been trying to reach you for 7 hours. "Phone died," I said again, maintaining the same even tone. "I apologize for not being available. What can I help you with?" "What can you—" He stopped, visibly trying to collect himself, ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "Mike, we had a massive security breach. Someone got into Fortress. Your system, the one you designed. They waltzed right through defenses that were supposed to be impenetrable and started extracting data before anyone even noticed." "When did it happen?" I asked, even though I knew the exact minute. 3:14 a.m. The automated alerts went out, but without you responding, we couldn't activate the emergency protocols. By the time we got the external team involved, they'd already disconnected. We have no idea how much damage they did. I sat down in one of the chairs facing his desk, crossed one leg over the other, took a sip of my coffee. "That does sound serious. What do we know so far?" Henderson stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Mike, are you okay? You're acting very calm about this." "Should I be panicking?" "No, but you built Fortress. This is your system. I'd expect you to be, I don't know, more concerned." "I'm concerned," I said. Though that wasn't quite true. Concern implied uncertainty, worry about an unknown outcome. I wasn't uncertain about anything. "What do you need from me?" One of the consultants, a thin man with expensive glasses and the kind of confidence that came from charging $500 an hour, leaned forward. "Mr. Torres, I'm Richard Vance with Cyber Shield Security. We need you to walk us through the Fortress architecture. Every layer, every protocol, every potential vulnerability. We need to understand how they got in and what they might have accessed." "That could take a while," I said. "The system is fairly complex." "We have time," Henderson said flatly. "We've cleared your schedule for the entire day, week, if necessary. This is all hands, everything else on hold." I thought about the irony of that. For 6 months during the Fortress implementation, I'd told Henderson repeatedly that we needed more time, more resources, more support. That rushing the timeline created risks. He told me about budget constraints, about executive pressure to deliver, about how we had to make it work with what we had. So I had made it work, burning nights and weekends to build something elegant and secure and complete, something I could be proud of. And now that it had failed, or appeared to have failed, suddenly time and resources were infinite. I can do that, I said. Should we start with the perimeter defenses or work our way from the outside in? We spent the next 4 hours in that conference room, me walking them through every layer of the system I'd built, watching the consultants take notes and nod and occasionally exchange glances that said they understood technically but didn't really understand. How could they? They hadn't lived with this architecture the way I had, hadn't dreamed about its logic, hadn't traced its data flows in their mind while falling asleep at night. Jordan joined us around noon, bringing printouts of the breach logs, pages and pages of timestamps and IP addresses and system events that told the story of last night's attack. I looked them over carefully, taking my time, while everyone waited for my expert analysis. "This is interesting," I said finally. "Interesting how?" Henderson asked. "They knew exactly what they were doing. Look at the timing here." I pointed to a sequence of events in the logs. They hit the secondary authentication server first, not the primary. Most attackers would go for the primary because it handles more traffic, seems like the obvious target. But the secondary has a slightly different configuration, a narrower window in the token refresh cycle. If you know about that window, and you time it right, you can slip through with less chance of triggering alerts. "How would they know about that window?" Richard asked. I shrugged. Social engineering, insider information, maybe they've been watching us for a while, mapping our systems. It's hard to say. "But it's not a flaw in your design," Henderson said, needing that reassurance. "The design is solid," I said truthfully, "but every system has attack surfaces. Nothing is completely impenetrable if someone has enough time, resources, and information." We went through more logs, more analysis. I explained the cascading failures, the way one breach led to another, the domino effect that let the attackers move deeper into the network than they should have been able to. I was helpful without being too helpful, informative without offering solutions, technically accurate while remaining fundamentally useless. Around 3 p.m., Henderson's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face going even paler than it already was. "It's Garrison," he said quietly. "James Garrison, the CEO. I have to take this." He stepped out of the conference room, and through the glass walls I could see him talking, nodding, his shoulders hunching further with each passing second. When he came back in, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. "They want a full briefing," he said. "Executive team, board members, everyone. Monday morning, 8 a.m. They want to know exactly what was accessed, what our exposure is, and how we're fixing it." "That's a tight timeline," Richard said. "I don't care about the timeline. We make it happen." Henderson turned to me. "Mike, I need you here all weekend. Whatever it takes. Overtime approval, anything you need. We have to have answers by Monday." I thought about my weekend plans. Lily had a sleepover on Saturday, and Emma and I were supposed to finally have a date night. Dinner at that Italian place she loved, maybe a movie after. Nothing fancy, just time together that didn't involve work laptops or emergency calls or me being physically present, but mentally elsewhere. "I can't do this weekend," I said. The room went silent. Henderson stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You can't?" "Family commitment," I said simply. "I can come in Monday morning early, help prep for the briefing, but this weekend isn't available." "Mike." Henderson's voice dropped to that careful, measured tone people use when they're trying very hard not to lose their temper. "This isn't optional. This is a company-wide emergency. We're talking about a potential data breach that could affect thousands of customers, expose confidential information, maybe even trigger regulatory investigations. We need all hands on deck. I understand the severity, I said, and I'll be here Monday to help however I can, but I'm not available this weekend. Is there something going on that we should know about? This from Richard, watching me with new interest. Some reason you're being resistant to helping resolve a crisis in systems you designed? The implication hung in the air, heavy and obvious. Suddenly, I wasn't just the absent architect. I was a potential suspect. After all, who better to breach a security system than the person who built it? I met his eyes calmly. No reason except that I have family commitments I'm not willing to break. I've broken enough of them over the years. This weekend isn't negotiable. Henderson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Mike, I don't think you understand how serious this is. I understand perfectly, I said. What I don't understand is why you think I should drop everything for a company emergency when the company couldn't find more than $4,500 to show appreciation for 6 months of work that made this system exist in the first place. There it was, the thing we'd all been dancing around, the elephant that had been sitting in every corner of every conversation since Tuesday afternoon. The number that had seemed so small, so insignificant, until it became the unit of measurement for everything else. Henderson's face shifted through several expressions before settling on something like understanding mixed with frustration. Mike, we talked about this. Those decisions came from above my level. I went to bat for you. I know, I said, standing up, and I appreciate the gesture. I let those words sit there for just a moment, watching them land, watching Henderson recognize his own corporate speak reflected back at him. I'll be here Monday morning, I said. Early, 6 a.m. if you need me. But right now, I'm going home. I walked out of the conference room, past Jordan, who stood frozen by his desk, past the clusters of colleagues who'd been watching through the glass walls, past Marcus at the front desk, who looked at me with something like awe. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine, letting the afternoon sun warm the interior, thinking about bridges and burning, and the strange mathematics of self-worth. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. How's your day going? I typed back. Interesting. Coming home now. Want to grab that dinner reservation for tomorrow night? Her response came immediately. Really, you're not working this weekend? Nope, I wrote, taking some time off. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Who are you, and what have you done with my husband? I smiled despite everything and started the car. Behind me, in that building full of panic and confusion and expensive consultants who couldn't fix problems they didn't understand, the company I'd given 8 years to was trying to figure out how to survive a crisis. And I was going home to my family. By Monday morning, they'd either have their answers or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd show up at 6 a.m. like I'd promised, ready to help. Or maybe ready for something else entirely. The weekend stretched ahead, full of possibilities I'd rarely let myself consider. Time with Emma, time with Lily, time to think about what came next, now that I'd finally stopped running towards something I was never going to catch. Appreciation, I'd learned, was worth exactly what you let it be worth. And silence, it turned out, could be worth a whole lot more. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected grace, no alarms, no emergency calls, no laptop open on the kitchen counter, while I grabbed coffee between crisis responses. Just sunlight filtering through the bedroom curtains, Emma still asleep beside me, and the rare, disorienting luxury of waking up naturally at 8:47 a.m. on a weekend. I lay there for a while, listening to the house. Lily was already up. I could hear the distant sound of cartoons from the living room, the familiar theme song of whatever show she was currently obsessed with. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn. A dog barked. Normal sounds. Weekend sounds. The kind of sounds that had been background noise in a life I'd been too busy to fully inhabit. Emma stirred, rolled over, opened one eye to look at me. "You're still here," she said, voice rough with sleep. "Where else would I be?" "Work. Where you've been every Saturday for the past 6 months." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face. "Mike, what's really going on? And don't tell me nothing. I've been married to you for 12 years. I know when something's shifted." I thought about how to answer that. About the breach, about my silent phone through the night, about walking out of the office yesterday while everything burned. About the strange liberation of finally not being the person who fixed everything. "I'm taking a break," I said simply. "From work?" "From being the person who drops everything every time they call." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Because of the bonus thing." "Because of a lot of things. The bonus was it was like getting a report card that showed me exactly what the last 8 years have been worth, and the number was a lot lower than I thought it would be." Emma sat up fully now, pulling her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them in that way she did when she was thinking something through carefully. "So what are you doing? Quitting?" "I don't know yet. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just stopping the pattern where I sacrifice everything for people who measure my value in numbers that don't make sense." I reached over, took her hand. "Yesterday, Henderson told me I needed to work all weekend. Emergency situation, all hands on deck, everything on fire. And I said no." Her eyes widened. "You said no." "I said I had family commitments I wasn't willing to break, that I'd help Monday, but this weekend wasn't available." "Mike," she squeezed my hand, hard. "What happened? What's the emergency?" "Security breach. Someone got into our systems Thursday night. Bad one, apparently. They needed me to help figure out how and what got compromised." Thursday night. She was putting pieces together, her lawyer's daughter mind working through timelines. "When you turned your phone off." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. "Jesus," she breathed. "Mike, they're going to think that I'm involved. Maybe. Probably. I'm the lead architect on the system that got breached, and I mysteriously became unreachable right when it happened." I shrugged, surprised by how little that possibility bothered me. "But I wasn't unreachable. My phone was on. They called. I just didn't answer." "Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. "That's not like you. You always answer." "Because I was tired, Emma. Tired of being the one person they could always count on. The one who'd always drop everything. Who'd always sacrifice family time and personal time and sleep and sanity to fix their problems. And I wanted to see what would happen if I just didn't." She pulled me into a hug then, fierce and sudden, her face pressed against my shoulder. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with something between tears and triumph. "Good," she said. "God, Mike, finally. I've watched you kill yourself for that company for years. Every time you miss Lily's recitals, every time you're on your laptop during dinner, every time you're physically here, but mentally somewhere else fixing their problems. I've wanted to shake you and tell you to stop. But I couldn't, because it's your career, your choice. And I had to trust you knew what you were doing. I thought I did know. I thought if I worked hard enough, proved my value enough, they'd recognize it. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Dedication equals reward. Sacrifice equals recognition. Except it doesn't," Emma said quietly. "Not always. Sometimes sacrifice just equals more sacrifice. Sometimes the more you give, the more they expect, until giving everything becomes the baseline, and anything less feels like betrayal." She was right. That was exactly what had happened. Somewhere along the way, my excellence had become expected, my availability assumed, my extra effort invisible. The miracle of what I'd built had become just the way things were, And when they'd calculated my retention bonus, all that history of going above and beyond had apparently counted for nothing, or counted for 4,500 anyway, which in the calculus of corporate appreciation might as well have been nothing. We spent Saturday doing ordinary things that felt extraordinary in their simplicity. Breakfast together, pancakes, Lily's request, with far too much syrup. A trip to the farmer's market where Emma bought vegetables we'd probably actually cook this week instead of ordering takeout while I worked late. Lily's sleepover preparation, which involved packing her bag 3 times because she kept remembering crucial items she couldn't possibly survive without. Her favorite stuffed elephant, her special pillow, the friendship bracelets she'd made for her friends. Around 2 p.m., after we dropped Lily at her friend's house, Emma and I found ourselves alone for the first time in months. Actually alone, with no work emergencies looming, no laptop open, no part of my mind calculating system architectures and security protocols. We went to the botanical gardens, a place Emma loved, and I'd always claimed to enjoy but never really had time to appreciate. We walked slowly through the paths, past flower beds in late-season bloom, around ponds where koi fish drifted like living paintings. Emma talked about a case she was working on at the firm where she did contract work, medical malpractice, complicated, making her dig into research she hadn't touched since law school. I listened, actually listened, not just waiting for a pause to check my phone. "This is nice," she said eventually, leaning into me as we sat on a bench overlooking a Japanese garden. "I'd forgotten what this feels like." "What?" "Having you present. Not just physically here, but actually present. Do you know how long it's been since we just existed together? No agenda, no emergency, no timer counting down until you have to get back to work." I thought about it. Really thought about it. 6 months? Longer, since before Fortress started. Maybe closer to a year. A year. 52 weeks of being technically present, but fundamentally absent. Of Emma falling asleep alone while I worked in my office. Of Lily asking if Daddy would make it to her things, phrasing it as a question because the answer wasn't guaranteed. Of becoming a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces between work emergencies. "I'm sorry," I said. Don't apologize. Just don't go back to it." She turned to face me, serious now. "Whatever happens Monday, whatever they say or threaten or offer, don't go back to being that person, the one who gives everything and gets back 4,500 in a speech about appreciation. You're worth more than that. They might fire me. Then they fire you. We'll figure it out. Your skills are valuable, Mike. You could get another job in a week. Hell, you could probably get that startup offer Jordan got, the one that paid him $42,000 to stay." She was right, technically. My skills were valuable, my experience extensive, my reputation in the industry solid. But there was something else at play here, something I was still working through. This wasn't just about money or recognition or even respect. It was about the story I'd been telling myself for 8 years, the narrative of loyalty and dedication and eventual reward that had finally revealed itself to be fiction. And now I was writing a different story, one where I wasn't the hero who saved the day. I was just a man who'd learned the difference between being needed and being valued. My phone, which I'd silenced but not turned off this time, buzzed periodically throughout the afternoon. Text messages from Henderson, from Jordan, from people in IT I barely knew, all reaching out with variations of the same message. "Where are you? We need you. This is urgent." I checked them occasionally, scrolled through without responding, then put the phone away, and went back to being present with Emma. Around sunset, as we sat at the Italian restaurant she loved, candlelit, intimate, the kind of place where conversations happened in quiet tones over wine that cost more than it should, my phone buzzed with a call. Not Henderson this time. David, Emma's father. I looked at the screen, then at Emma. "Don't answer it," she said immediately. "Whatever he wants, it can wait." But I was curious now. What would prompt David to call me on a Saturday evening? We weren't close enough for social calls, and Emma had said she hadn't told her parents about the breach situation. "Give me just a second," I said, and stepped outside to take the call. "Michael." David's voice had that particular quality it got when he was exercising professional authority. "I'm calling as a courtesy. I had lunch with James Garrison yesterday." James Garrison, the CEO of my company. Of course, David would know him. They probably ran in the same circles, belonged to the same clubs, played golf at the same courses. "Okay," I said neutrally. He mentioned they're dealing with a significant security incident, a breach that has the board very concerned about liability exposure. He also mentioned that their lead systems architect, you, has been difficult to reach during the crisis. "I've been spending time with my family." "Mike, I don't think you understand the seriousness of the situation. From what James described, this could be catastrophic for the company. Regulatory investigations, lawsuits, the works. They need their top people focused on containment and mitigation, not taking personal time." The traffic passed on the street behind me, headlights painting yellow streaks across the darkening evening. Inside the restaurant, I could see Emma through the window watching me with concern. "David, with respect, my employment relationship is with the company, not with you. If Henderson has concerns about my performance or availability, he can address them through proper channels." "This isn't about proper channels." His voice hardened. "This is about reputation. Yours, and by extension, our family's. James is a friend, and he's confused about why his lead architect seems to be sabotaging the crisis response. Those aren't good optics, Michael." "Sabotaging." I repeated the word slowly, tasting it. "Because I didn't answer my phone at 3 in the morning? Because you're not being a team player? Because when the company needed you most, you disappeared? And now you're ignoring calls and prioritizing personal time over professional responsibility? That's not the behavior of someone who wants to advance in their career. It's the behavior of someone who's already checked out." Maybe he was right about that last part. Maybe I had checked out in the moment when I saw that 4,500 bonus notification and felt the floor drop out from under 8 years of assumed value. "I appreciate your concern," I said, keeping my voice even. "But I've committed to being there Monday morning, and I will be. What happens between now and then is my personal time, and I'm choosing to spend it with Emma and Lily, just like you suggested last week, appreciating what I have rather than focusing on what I think I deserve." I could hear him inhale sharply, recognizing his own words reflected back at him. "Don't make this about the bonus," he said. "That's petty, Michael. This is bigger than compensation. This is about character, about integrity, about being the kind of person who steps up when things get difficult, not the kind who holds grudges and makes everyone else suffer for perceived slights." Perceived slights. 42,000 versus 4,500, and David was calling it a perceived slight. The arithmetic of disrespect reduced to a matter of perception, as if the numbers themselves weren't objective, weren't real, weren't a statement of value printed in the clearest possible terms. "I need to get back to my dinner," I said. "Emma's waiting. I'll talk to you later, David." "Michael," I ended the call and turned off my phone completely. Not silenced. Off. Then I went back inside, slid into the booth across from Emma, and took a long drink of wine. "What did he want?" she asked. "To tell me I'm damaging the family reputation by not being a team player during the company crisis." Her face flushed red. "He said that? How does he even know about— Oh, he had lunch with your CEO. They're friends, apparently, country club buddies or whatever. Garrison told him about the breach, about me being unreachable, and David decided it was his responsibility to call and straighten me out." "I'm going to kill him," Emma said flatly. "I'm going to drive over there right now and—" Don't. I reached across the table, took her hand. It's fine. It's actually kind of clarifying, in a way. Helps me understand how all the pieces fit together. What do you mean? David knows Garrison. Garrison knows David. They're friends, part of the same network. And in that network, certain rules apply. You show up. You sacrifice. You put the company first. You appreciate the gesture when they throw you scraps, and you never, ever make waves that might embarrass your connections. Emma's jaw tightened. That's not how it should work. No, but it's how it does work. And I spent 8 years playing by those rules, thinking they'd eventually pay off, thinking loyalty was valuable. Turns out the only thing that's valuable is leverage, being willing to walk away, having other offers, making yourself scarce enough that they notice your absence. Like Jordan, she said quietly. Exactly like Jordan. He got $42,000 not because he was more valuable, but because he was willing to leave. Because he had leverage. I got $4,500 because I'd stayed, because I'd proven I'd always be there, always answer the phone, always fix the problems. And once you prove that, once you make yourself that reliable, your value decreases. You become infrastructure instead of talent. And infrastructure just needs to work. You don't reward it, you maintain it. The waiter arrived with our entrees, and we paused while he arranged plates, offered pepper, refilled water glasses. When he left, Emma was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you going to do Monday?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Show up. See what they say. See what they offer, if anything." "And if they fire you?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. The fear that should have been there. The mortgage, the bills, the security of steady employment felt distant, theoretical. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I'd finally reached the end of caring. Or maybe I'd just realized that the thing I'd been afraid of losing wasn't actually worth holding on to. "Then they fire me," I said, "and I find something else. Something where my value isn't measured in gestures and scraps." Emma smiled then, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen from her in months. "Good, because I married someone brilliant and talented and capable of extraordinary things. And I've watched that person slowly disappear into a job that took everything and gave back almost nothing. So if they fire you," she raised her wine glass, "then maybe that's the best thing that could happen." We clinked glasses, sealed some unspoken agreement, and ate our dinner while the restaurant hummed with other people's conversations, other people's Saturday nights, other people's normal lives. Outside, the evening deepened into full dark. Somewhere across town, consultants were probably still huddled in conference rooms, trying to untangle the breach that had happened 48 hours ago. Henderson was probably on his 5th pot of coffee, his weekend completely consumed by crisis management. Jordan was probably there too, young and eager and still believing that sacrifice would be rewarded. And I was here, eating pasta with my wife, my phone turned off, my emergency services declined. For the first time in 8 years, I was unreachable. And it felt like freedom. Sunday was even quieter. We picked up Lily from her sleepover. She was buzzing with stories about movies and snacks and staying up late. That particular exhausted happiness kids get from time with their friends. We went to the park, flew a kite Emma had bought on impulse at the farmer's market, watched Lily run across the grass with the string trailing behind her like hope on a tether. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Emma and I sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Tomorrow's going to be intense," Emma said. "Probably. Are you ready?" Was I ready? Ready for what? Confrontation? Consequences? Questions about my absence during the crisis? Accusations that might be veiled or might be direct? The possibility of walking out of that building without a job, without the identity I'd built for 8 years. I think so, I said, but I'm not going in to fight. I'm just going in to see what happens next. And if they want you to fix everything, to make it all better, to be the hero who saves the day, then I'll fix what I can. But on my terms, not theirs. She nodded, satisfied with that answer. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that exists between people who know each other well enough not to need constant conversation. Around 9 p.m., I went to my office and turned on my phone for the first time since Saturday afternoon. The notification cascade was less intense this time, just 12 new messages, all from work numbers. I opened the most recent one, from Henderson, time-stamped an hour ago. Mike, I need to know you're coming in tomorrow. Board meeting at 8 a.m. If you're not there, we have serious problems. Call me. I typed back a single line. I'll be there at 6 a.m. as promised. His response came within seconds. Thank you. 2 words. No elaboration. I could read 1,000 things into those 2 words. Relief, frustration, anger, gratitude, suspicion. But what I mostly read was desperation. They needed me, which meant I had something I hadn't had before. Leverage. I set the phone down, looked around my office. The monitors that had displayed system logs at all hours, the whiteboard with architecture diagrams I'd drawn and erased and redrawn 100 times, the coffee mug collection from various tech conferences, the accumulated debris of a career built one late night at a time. Tomorrow would reveal what that career was actually worth, not in bonus amounts or retention calculations, but in the moment when they realized that the infrastructure they'd taken for granted was controlled by someone who'd finally learned he could turn it off. I turned off the lights and went to bed, setting my alarm for 4:30 a.m. By morning, everything would change. But tonight, I slept better than I had in months. The office at 5:53 a.m. was a different creature than the one I'd left Friday afternoon. The lobby lights were harsh and unforgiving, revealing coffee stains on the carpet I'd never noticed before, scuff marks on the walls, the general wear of a building that looked professional in normal hours, but showed its age in the pre-dawn stillness. Marcus wasn't at the security desk yet. His shift started at 7, so I used my badge to access the elevator, rode up to the 3rd floor alone, listening to the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. The IT department was already occupied, not full but not empty either. Half a dozen people scattered across workstations, surrounded by the debris of all-nighters, pizza boxes, energy drink cans, the particular disorder that came from sustained crisis response. Jordan was there, asleep with his head on his desk, still wearing Friday's clothes. 2 of the consultants I recognized from Friday occupied the main conference room, gesturing at screens covered in network diagrams. Henderson's office light was on. I set my bag down at my desk, logged into my computer with the muscle memory of 8 years, and pulled up the system logs from Thursday night. The full logs, not the sanitized version they'd been analyzing all weekend. I had access levels they'd never bothered to replicate for anyone else. Architect privileges, root access, the keys to every door in the digital kingdom I'd built. I spent 20 minutes reviewing what had happened, tracing the attack path step by step, understanding not just what the breach had accomplished, but what it had revealed. Then I closed the logs, made myself coffee from the department machine, bad coffee but familiar, and walked to Henderson's office. He looked up when I knocked, and the relief that crossed his face was so naked it was almost embarrassing. He looked like he hadn't slept, hadn't shaved, possibly hadn't changed clothes. His office smelled stale, like recycled air and desperation. "Mike," he said, standing up too quickly, nearly knocking over his coffee. "Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd actually come." I said I would. I sat down across from him without being invited, took a sip of my terrible coffee. "You said 6 a.m. It's 6:02. "Right. Yes. Thank you." He sat back down, ran his hands through his hair, That gesture again, the one that meant he was barely holding it together. Mike, we need to talk. Before the board meeting, there are concerns about the breach, about your absence during the breach. He said it carefully, like he was defusing a bomb. Your phone went straight to voicemail for hours during the exact window when the attack happened. And you're the lead architect, the person with the deepest knowledge of these systems. Are you asking me something, Robert? He flinched at the use of his first name. I never called him Robert. It was always Henderson, the professional distance that marked our roles. But that distance felt different now, like something that could be collapsed with the right pressure. I'm saying the external consultants have raised questions about the timing, about how the attackers knew exactly where to hit us, exactly which systems were vulnerable, exactly how to maximize damage while minimizing detection time. That's not the work of random hackers. That's insider knowledge. And you think I provided that knowledge? I think we need to eliminate that possibility before we go into a room with the board and explain how our supposedly impenetrable security system was compromised in under 40 minutes. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Mike, if there's anything you need to tell me, anything at all about Thursday night, now is the time. I can help manage it, frame it properly. But once we're in that boardroom, once the lawyers get involved, my hands are tied. I thought about all the ways I could answer that. All the explanations I could offer, the justifications, the technical details that would paint me as either guilty or innocent, depending on how they were interpreted. I thought about the fact that Henderson was trying to help, in his way, giving me an off-ramp before everything went official. But I was tired of helping people understand things they should have understood already. I didn't provide insider knowledge to anyone, I said simply. I didn't breach my own systems. I didn't sabotage the company. What I did do was turn off my phone and go to sleep at a normal hour because I was tired and my family needed me more than work did. That's it. That's the whole story. But you knew about the breach. You had to have gotten the alerts. I got them. I chose not to respond immediately. There's a difference between being complicit in an attack and deciding not to drop everything to fix one. Henderson stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Mike, that's the same thing. When you're the lead architect, when you have the knowledge and access you have, choosing not to respond is effectively allowing the breach to continue. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, we have an entire IT department. We have emergency protocols. We have redundant systems and fail-safes and backup personnel specifically so the company isn't dependent on any single person being available 24/7. If my absence for a few hours caused catastrophic damage, that's an organizational structure problem, not a Mike Torres problem. That's semantics. No, that's reality. You built a system where I was the single point of failure, where everything depended on me being constantly available, constantly sacrificing, constantly putting work above everything else. And when I finally stopped doing that, the system failed. That's on you, not me. His face went through several colors, settling on an unhealthy grayish tone. Mike, the board is going to ask very direct questions about your availability during this crisis, about why you were unreachable, about whether your dissatisfaction with your retention bonus played any role in your response time or lack thereof. There it was, the thing we'd been circling around since Friday. They thought this was revenge. They thought I'd sabotage them, or at minimum allow damage to occur because I was bitter about compensation. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. My retention bonus, I said slowly, reflected the company's valuation of my contributions. $4,500 for 6 months of work that created the security infrastructure this entire organization depends on. Meanwhile, Jordan Mills, who I trained, who learned everything he knows from me, received $42,000 because he had a competing offer. That told me everything I needed to know about how the company calculates value. So this is revenge? No. This is me learning that loyalty is a liability, that sacrifice is penalized, that the only thing that matters in this company is leverage, being willing to leave, having other options, making yourself scarce. Jordan got rewarded for being willing to walk away. I got $4,500 for staying. So I stopped sacrificing. I stopped being constantly available. I started treating my job like a job instead of a calling. That's not revenge. That's just adaptation. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his desk in an irregular rhythm. Outside his office, through the glass walls, I could see the rest of the department starting to wake up, Jordan lifting his head groggily, one of the consultants getting more coffee, the slow acceleration toward the board meeting that would determine everyone's immediate future. "Mike," Henderson said finally, his voice careful, "I need you to fix this. I need you to walk into that boardroom and explain exactly what happened, how bad the damage is, and what we're doing to prevent it from happening again. Can you do that?" "I can explain what happened," I said. "Whether you like the explanation is a different question." "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, drained the last of my coffee, set the cup down on his desk with deliberate precision. "It means you should probably look at the full logs from Thursday night. The actual logs, not the sanitized version the consultants have been working from. You might find them illuminating." "I don't have access to the full logs. They're restricted to architect-level credentials." "I know." I smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. "I'll see you in the boardroom at 8. I spent the next 90 minutes at my desk, preparing. Not the kind of preparation Henderson probably imagined. Charts and graphs, explaining the breach, remediation plans, technical documentation. Instead, I compiled something different. A timeline. A very specific timeline that showed exactly what had happened Thursday night, minute by minute, with context that the board might find interesting. Jordan shuffled over around 7:15, looking like death warmed over, clutching coffee like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Mike," he said, his voice scratchy. "Man, where have you been? We've been dying here all weekend. These consultants don't understand our systems like you do. They kept asking questions I couldn't answer, looking for documentation that doesn't exist because it's all in your head." "Sorry," I said, not sounding particularly sorry. "Family stuff. Family stuff." He repeated it like the words didn't make sense. "Mike, this was a massive breach, potentially millions in liability. We needed you. You have 42,000 reasons to figure it out yourself." He blinked, confused, then understanding dawned across his face. Oh, this is about the bonuses. Mike, come on, that's not fair. I didn't ask for that amount. I just told them about my other offer and they made a business decision," I finished for him, "based on leverage and risk assessment, just like I'm making a business decision now about how much of myself I'm willing to sacrifice for a company that values sacrifice at $40,500. That's not what the bonus meant. They value you. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" "Because from where I'm sitting, they value you 9 times more than they value me. And you've been here 18 months to my 8 years. So either their valuation system is deeply broken, or they correctly assessed that my loyalty made me cheap. Either way, I'm done subsidizing their operational costs with my personal life." Jordan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mike, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize. You did exactly what you should have done. You created leverage and used it. I'm not mad at you, Jordan. I'm just done being the person who doesn't have leverage because I've proven I'll always be here no matter what they offer me." He stood there for another moment, looking lost, then shuffled back to his desk. I felt a small twinge of guilt. Jordan really was a good kid, and this wasn't his fault, but he needed to understand how the game worked before the game destroyed him the way it had almost destroyed me. At 7:45, Henderson emerged from his office wearing a fresh shirt. He kept spares here for exactly these situations, and gestured for me to follow him. The boardroom was on the 5th floor, executive territory I rarely visited. Wood paneling, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The table could seat 20, but only 8 chairs were occupied when we arrived. I recognized most of them. James Garrison at the head of the table, looking grim. Sarah Chen, the CFO, reviewing something on her tablet. Marcus Webb, head of legal, with that particular expression lawyers get when they smell liability. 3 board members whose names I knew, but whose faces were unfamiliar. They usually only appeared quarterly for official meetings. And 2 people I didn't recognize at all, probably additional legal or crisis management consultants brought in for this specific disaster. And at the far end, looking uncomfortable in a chair that wasn't meant for visitors, was Richard Vance from CyberShield Security, the consultant who'd questioned me Friday about insider knowledge. Everyone looked up when Henderson and I entered. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "Michael," Garrison said, standing up with the kind of forced courtesy that meant he was extremely angry. "Thank you for joining us. Please, sit." I took a seat midway down the table, set my laptop in front of me, and waited. Garrison remained standing, his hands flat on the table, his expression carved from granite. "Let me be direct. We're here because our company suffered a significant security breach Thursday night, a breach that compromised customer data, potentially exposed confidential business information, and may trigger regulatory investigations. We have consultants who've been working around the clock to assess the damage. What we don't have is a clear answer about how this happened, or what we're doing to prevent it from happening again." He paused, looking directly at me. "What we also have is questions about why our lead systems architect, the person most qualified to respond to this crisis, was unreachable for 7 critical hours during and immediately after the breach. So before we discuss technical details, I need to understand that timeline. Mike, can you explain where you were Thursday night and why you didn't respond to emergency protocols?" The room was completely silent. 8 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting for an answer that would either exonerate or condemn me. I could have said a lot of things. Could have explained about being tired, about family commitments, about needing a break. Could have been apologetic, contrite, defensive. Could have played the game the way I'd been playing it for 8 years, smoothing over conflict, making excuses, prioritizing their comfort over my truth. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the timeline I'd prepared, and turned the screen toward Garrison. "I was at home," I said evenly. "In bed. Asleep. My phone was on, I received the alerts, and I made a conscious decision not to respond immediately. I chose to prioritize 8 hours of sleep and time with my family over an emergency that frankly wasn't my responsibility to solve alone." "Wasn't your responsibility." Marcus Webb, the lawyer, leaned forward. "You're the lead architect. How is a breach of your systems not your responsibility?" "Because I'm an employee, not an owner. Because I'm paid a salary for specific hours and specific duties, and being on call 24/7 was never in my job description. Because this company has incident response protocols, redundant staff, and backup systems specifically designed to function when key personnel are unavailable. If those systems failed, that's an organizational problem, not a personal failing." "That's a very convenient interpretation," Webb said coldly. "It's the correct interpretation. But if you want to discuss what happened Thursday night, I'm happy to walk you through it. All of it. Including some context I think you'll find illuminating." I turned my laptop around so the screen faced the room. "This is the complete timeline of the breach, with administrative logs that only architect-level credentials can access. Shall I begin?" Garrison exchanged glances with Webb, with Sarah Chen with the board members. Some unspoken communication passed between them, a decision made in eye contact and subtle nods. "Please," Garrison said, sitting back down. "Walk us through what happened." I advanced to the first slide of my timeline. At 3:14 a.m. Thursday morning, an external actor gained initial access to our network through a vulnerability in the secondary authentication server. The attack was sophisticated, well-planned, and demonstrated detailed knowledge of our system architecture. Richard Vance nodded. "That's consistent with what we found. The question is how they obtained that knowledge." "I'm getting to that," I said. The attacker moved through our systems with unusual precision, hitting exactly the right targets to maximize data access while minimizing alert triggers. They extracted approximately 47 gigabytes of data over the course of 33 minutes before disconnecting. "What data?" Sarah Chen asked sharply. "Customer information? Financial records?" "Neither, actually. That's what's interesting." I advanced to the next slide, showing the file access logs. They targeted internal documents, specifically compensation records, retention bonus calculations, and internal emails about personnel decisions from the past 6 months. The silence that followed was absolute. "They stole payroll information," Garrison said slowly. "Not payroll, bonus calculations. The documentation showing how the company decided who got retention bonuses and in what amounts. The emails between executive leadership and finance about budget allocations. The spreadsheets showing the breakdown by employee." I let that sit for a moment, watching understanding dawn across several faces. "Why would hackers want that information?" one of the board members asked. "There's no resale value in internal bonus data." "There isn't," I agreed. "Unless the breach wasn't about theft. Unless it was about exposure. About proving that the systems everyone believed were impenetrable could be compromised. About demonstrating that when you underpay your lead architect, you create vulnerabilities." "Wait." Webb was putting pieces together now, his lawyer brain working through implications. "Are you saying you orchestrated this? That you hired someone to breach our systems to make a point about your compensation?" "No," I said simply. "I'm saying I chose not to stop it when I easily could have. I received the alerts at 3:14 a.m. I could have logged in remotely, activated emergency protocols, shut down the compromised systems, and contained the breach within 5 minutes. But I chose not to. I chose to sleep. And because I chose to sleep, the breach continued for 33 minutes instead of 5. That's not sabotage. That's just declining to volunteer unpaid emergency labor at 3 in the morning, after years of doing exactly that for inadequate compensation." The room erupted. 3 people talking at once, voices rising, Garrison's hands slamming down on the table for order. Webb was saying something about liability and willful negligence. Sarah Chen was calculating damages. The board members were trying to understand what they'd just heard. Henderson sat frozen, staring at me like I'd just confessed to murder. And I sat calmly, hands folded on the table, waiting for the storm to pass. Because I'd finally learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Order took longer to restore than chaos had taken to create. That's always the way, isn't it? A building takes months to construct and seconds to demolish. Trust accumulates slowly and evaporates instantly. A career built over 8 years can unravel in the time it takes to tell the truth. Garrison finally got control of the room by standing up and speaking in the kind of voice that made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Everyone stop, right now." The conversations died mid-sentence. "Mike, I need to understand what you just said. You're telling us you deliberately chose not to respond to a security breach that you could have stopped." "Not deliberately chose not to stop it," I corrected. "Deliberately chose not to volunteer uncompensated emergency labor. There's a distinction." "That's the same goddamn thing," Webb snapped. "Is it? Because I'm an exempt employee paid for a standard 40-hour workweek. Nothing in my contract specifies on-call availability. Nothing requires me to respond to emergencies outside business hours. The company chose not to establish formal on-call rotations or compensation for after-hours availability. You chose to rely on my voluntary goodwill instead. And at 3:14 a.m. on Thursday, after receiving a retention bonus that valued 8 years of my work at $40,500, I chose not to volunteer that goodwill anymore. Sarah Chen was typing rapidly on her tablet, probably pulling up my employment contract, verifying my claims about on-call requirements. Her expression suggested she wasn't finding what she hoped to find. "This is negligence," Webb said flatly. "Willful negligence at minimum, possibly criminal. You had a duty to protect company assets and you deliberately failed to fulfill that duty." "Show me the statute," I said calmly. "Show me the law that requires an employee to work for free. Because that's what you're describing, an obligation to provide skilled labor without compensation outside contracted hours with no formal agreement or consideration. That's not negligence. That's just refusing to be exploited." "You were exploited?" Garrison's voice dripped with disbelief. "We paid you a 6-figure salary. We gave you a retention bonus of $40,500 for 6 months of work. That included nights, weekends, and holidays. Meanwhile, Jordan Mills, who I trained, who's been here 18 months, received $42,000 because he had a competing offer. You paid him 9 times what you paid me because he demonstrated he was willing to leave. You paid me scraps because I'd proven I would stay no matter what. That's not compensation. That's exploitation dressed up as appreciation." One of the board members, a woman whose name I thought was Patricia, spoke up for the first time. "This is about the retention bonuses? You let a major security breach continue because you were upset about your bonus?" "No," I said, and my voice was harder now, sharper. "I let the systems you built fail because you built them to fail. You created a structure where everything depended on one person being available 24/7 with no formal on-call structure, no compensation for availability, no backup personnel with equivalent knowledge. You built a single point of failure and then got angry when that single point chose not to be available. That's not my negligence. That's yours." Richard Vance, who'd been quiet during the chaos, leaned forward. "But you didn't just refuse to respond. You have architect-level access. You could have remotely disabled systems, locked out the attackers, minimized the damage. Instead, according to what you're telling us, you watched it happen." "I didn't watch anything. I was asleep. My phone received alerts. I woke up enough to see them and made a decision. The same decision millions of people make every day when their phone buzzes after hours. I chose not to check work email. I chose not to respond to an emergency that wasn't mine to solve alone. And then I went back to sleep. While our systems were being compromised. While your systems, not my systems, were experiencing the natural consequences of poor organizational planning." Henderson spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room, his voice hollow. "Mike, I don't understand. This isn't like you. You've always been the person we could count on. The one who dropped everything, who never complained, who fixed things no matter what time it was or what it cost you personally. What changed?" "What changed?" Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. "I got a performance review," I said quietly, "in the form of a dollar amount. And that review told me exactly what my dedication was worth. It told me that loyalty is a liability, that sacrifice is penalized, that the only thing this company respects is the threat of departure. So I stopped being loyal. I stopped sacrificing. And I started treating this job the way it treats me, as a transaction. Hours for dollars, expertise for salary, nothing more." "That's incredibly cynical," Patricia said. "That's incredibly realistic," I countered. "You want to know what cynical is? Cynical is telling employees their work matters while paying them a fraction of what you pay people who threaten to leave. Cynical is building your entire security infrastructure on one person's unpaid overtime and then expressing shock when that person stops volunteering their personal time. Cynical is calling a $4,500 bonus appreciation when it's actually an insult. Garrison's face had gone red. Mike, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing here, but I'm not trying to accomplish anything, I interrupted. You asked me to explain what happened Thursday night. I'm explaining. An external actor breached our perimeter at 3:14 a.m. The automated system sent alerts. Under previous circumstances, I would have responded immediately, worked through the night, contained the breach, and prevented any data loss. But those previous circumstances included an assumption that my dedication would be recognized and rewarded appropriately. When I learned that assumption was false, I adjusted my behavior accordingly. By sabotaging the company, Webb said, by establishing boundaries. There's a difference. Sarah Chen looked up from her tablet. I've reviewed your employment contract. You're right that there's no formal on-call requirement, but there is language about performing duties as assigned and protecting company assets. A reasonable interpretation of that language would include responding to security emergencies. A reasonable interpretation might, I agreed, but reasonable interpretations don't hold up well when you're asking someone to work uncompensated hours with no formal agreement, especially not when you've just demonstrated through your retention bonus calculations that you don't actually value that person's contributions. You can't have it both ways. You can't tell someone they're worth $4,500 and then expect them to behave like they're worth $42,000. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence had a different quality. Less shock, more calculation. I could almost see the gears turning behind their eyes. Legal exposure, liability, public relations, the nightmare scenario of this becoming public knowledge. What do you want? Garrison asked finally. More money? A revised bonus? Some kind of compensation package that makes you feel properly valued? I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound harsh in the quiet boardroom. You think this is a negotiation? You think I'm holding the company hostage for a better offer? Aren't you? No, I'm explaining why your systems failed. You asked for an explanation and I'm giving you one. What you do with that information is up to you. Webb was making notes on a legal pad, his handwriting sharp and angry. Mike, I need you to understand the seriousness of what you're describing. Deliberate inaction during a security crisis, even if technically legal, creates enormous liability exposure. If customer data was compromised, if there are lawsuits or regulatory fines, the company will argue that damages were increased by your refusal to respond. That makes you personally liable. Does it? Because I'm pretty sure that's why companies carry insurance. And I'm very sure that courts don't look kindly on organizations that try to push liability onto individual employees who are acting within the bounds of their employment contracts. You're awfully confident about the legal implications, Patricia observed. My father-in-law is a senior partner at Morrison, Webb and Chen, I said. He's spent 40 years practicing corporate law. I've picked up a few things over family dinners. That landed with visible impact. Webb's expression shifted. He clearly recognized the firm name, probably knew David personally, was rapidly recalculating the legal landscape. Morrison, Webb, and Chen was one of the most prestigious firms in the city. If I had access to that level of legal counsel, suing me personally became exponentially more complicated. So you planned this, Garrison said slowly. You let the breach happen, knowing you had legal cover, knowing we couldn't hold you personally liable, all to make some kind of point about your compensation. I didn't plan anything. I just stopped assuming that my unpaid availability was obligatory. Everything that followed was the natural consequence of that decision. Richard Vance, who'd been studying me throughout this exchange with increasing interest, spoke up again. Mike, walk me through something. You said the attackers specifically targeted compensation records and retention bonus calculations. How did you know that? We've been analyzing the breach all weekend, and we hadn't isolated exactly what data was accessed. The logs are fragmented, corrupted in places. It would take architect-level knowledge to reconstruct the complete picture. Everyone turned to look at me. The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Because I reviewed the full logs this morning, I said. Before this meeting, using my architect credentials to access information that apparently your consultants couldn't reach. And you didn't think to share that analysis with us over the weekend? Henderson's voice was pained. Mike, we've been working blind, trying to figure out what was taken, what our exposure is. You had that information and just sat on it? I had family commitments, I said simply, and you didn't formally request my analysis. You demanded I work the weekend. I declined, and you brought in expensive consultants instead. Presumably they're getting paid quite well for their expertise. I didn't see any reason to volunteer mine for free. This is insane, one of the board members, a man whose name I didn't know, said. You're describing a complete breakdown of professional responsibility, of basic human decency. People depend on these systems. Customers trust us with their data. And you just let them down because you were angry. About a bonus? No, I said, and my voice went cold. I let the company experience the natural consequences of treating its most critical employee as disposable infrastructure. You want to talk about human decency? Let's talk about asking someone to sacrifice their family, their health, their personal life for years on the promise of recognition and reward, and then delivering a bonus that says their work was worth 1/9 what you paid someone with 18 months of experience. Let's talk about the decency of that. Garrison stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This meeting is over. Mike, you're suspended pending investigation, effective immediately. Turn over your credentials, your laptop, your phone. You'll be contacted by HR regarding the terms of your suspension. No, I said calmly. Excuse me. I'm not turning over anything, and I'm not suspended. Webb looked like he was going to have an aneurysm. You don't get to decide that. The company has the right to suspend employees during investigations of misconduct. The company has the right to suspend employees for cause. But you have an established cause. I didn't breach any systems. I didn't steal any data. I didn't violate any policies. I simply declined to work uncompensated hours, which is my legal right. If you suspend me without cause, you're opening yourself up to wrongful termination claims. And given that I've just described in detail how your retention bonus structure discriminates against loyal employees in favor of those threatening to leave, you really don't want to add wrongful termination to your list of legal exposures. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes either violence or capitulation. I could see Garrison trying to decide which direction to go, whether to push harder or retreat and regroup. Sarah Chen broke the deadlock. We need to understand the full extent of the breach before we make any personnel decisions. Mike, you said you've analyzed the logs. What exactly was taken? I looked at her for a long moment, weighing my options. I could refuse to answer, could maintain my position that they didn't deserve my unpaid expertise, could watch them flounder with their expensive consultants while the company bled liability and uncertainty. Or I could give them enough rope to hang themselves. The attackers, I said slowly, extracted 47 gigabytes of data over 33 minutes. That data included detailed compensation records for the IT department, salaries, bonuses, stock options, the complete picture of who was paid what. They also took internal emails between executive leadership discussing retention strategies, including specific conversations about why certain employees received certain bonus amounts. I paused, letting that sink in. They took the email thread where you, James, told Sarah that Jordan's retention bonus needed to be substantial enough to discourage departure, while mine could be minimal given his demonstrated loyalty and lack of outside options. Your exact words, from an email dated 3 weeks ago. The color drained from Garrison's face. Sarah Chen's fingers had stopped moving on her tablet. Henderson looked like he might be sick. They also took, I continued, my voice perfectly level, the spreadsheet that HR prepared showing the retention bonus amounts for every employee in IT, with a column labeled flight risk that rated each person from 1 to 10. Jordan was rated a 9. I was rated a 2. The formula at the bottom showed bonus amounts correlating directly with flight risk scores, not with performance or value or years of service, just with how likely you were to leave. Patricia made a small sound, something between a gasp and a groan. That spreadsheet exists? Someone actually created a document explicitly showing we pay people based on whether they're threatening to quit. HR created it, I said, at executive leadership's request, as part of the retention bonus planning process, and now it's in the hands of whoever breached our systems Thursday night. Jesus Christ, Webb muttered. If that becomes public, if employees see that document, they'll understand exactly how the company values them, I finished. They'll see in black and white that loyalty is penalized and threats are rewarded. They'll see the explicit calculation that determined who got what. And they'll make their own decisions about whether they want to keep working here. This is catastrophic, Sarah Chen said quietly. Not just the liability from the data breach itself, but the employee relations nightmare if this information leaks. We could lose half the department. The good half, I added helpfully. The ones with options, the ones you rated as high flight risks. They'll see they were right to leverage other offers, and they'll start doing it more aggressively. Or they'll just leave. Either way, you'll be left with the loyal ones, the ones you rated as low flight risks because they've demonstrated they'll stay, no matter how badly you treat them. And then you'll wonder why your talent retention gets progressively worse. Garrison sat back down heavily, his face ashen. Can you fix this? Can you determine where the data went? Who has it? What they plan to do with it? Probably, I said, with enough time and access and resources. But that's a lot of work, skilled work, the kind of work that should probably be compensated appropriately. How much? He asked bluntly. What do you want? I want, I said slowly, savoring the moment, to be valued appropriately, not based on whether I'm threatening to leave, but based on what I actually contribute. I want the company to acknowledge that building your entire security infrastructure isn't worth $40,500. I want formal on-call compensation for any after-hours availability. And I want the retention bonus system revised, so it's based on merit and contribution, not on manipulation and threats. Those are substantial changes, Sarah Chen said. So was building Fortress. So was spending 6 months of nights and weekends creating the system that protects everything you do. So was training Jordan and half the other people in that department. Substantial work deserves substantial recognition. Garrison looked at Webb, at Sarah, at the board members. Some silent negotiation happened in eye contact and subtle expressions. Finally, he turned back to me. We'll need to discuss this, formulate a proper response, get legal's input on the implications. But Mike, I need to know, can you contain this breach? Can you prevent that data from becoming public? And there it was, the moment where I either became the hero who saved them or the villain who watched them burn. I thought about Emma's words from Saturday night, about Lily's piano recital, about 8 years of sacrifice rewarded with $4,500, and a lecture about appreciation, about the spreadsheet that rated me a 2 out of 10 in flight risk because I'd proven I would stay no matter what. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe, but I'll need full access, full authority, and a formal commitment to the changes I outlined, in writing, before I start. That's extortion, Webb said. That's negotiation, I corrected. And given that I'm the only person who fully understands these systems, who can trace the attack path, who might be able to prevent your catastrophic employee relations nightmare from becoming public, I'd say I finally have what Jordan had 3 weeks ago. What's that? Patricia asked. Leverage. They asked me to wait outside while they discussed my terms. Not in the hallway. That would have been too openly hostile. But in a smaller conference room adjacent to the boardroom. Glass walls on one side so I could see the city waking up below. Thousands of people starting their Monday morning commute with no idea that 5 floors above them, a company was imploding in slow motion. Henderson walked me there personally, his face carefully neutral, his movements mechanical. At the door, he paused, looked like he wanted to say something, then just shook his head and walked away. Through the glass walls of the main boardroom, I could see them huddled together, voices raised, gestures sharp. Garrison was on his phone. Webb was typing furiously. Sarah Chen was pulling up documents on her tablet, showing them to the board members who leaned in to read. They were calculating, running numbers, assessing exposures, weighing the cost of meeting my demands against the cost of refusing. I sat down at the small conference table, opened my laptop, and did something I'd been avoiding all weekend. I checked my personal email. The first message was from a recruiter I'd spoken with 6 months ago, back when I'd briefly considered leaving before the Fortress project had consumed my life. Subject line, senior architect role, competitive compensation package. I'd ignored it at the time, too busy, too committed, too convinced that my loyalty to the company would eventually be rewarded. I opened it now, scrolled through the details. The salary range was 40% higher than what I currently made. The benefits included formal on-call compensation, equity, unlimited PTO. The company was smaller but growing, well-funded, with leadership that apparently understood that retaining talent required actually paying them. I drafted a response. Still interested. Available for conversation this week. Then I opened the next email. Another recruiter, different company, similar opportunity. Then another. Then another. Apparently, senior systems architects with my background were in demand. I'd just been too busy being loyal to notice. By the time the boardroom door opened 40 minutes later, I had 5 draft responses ready to send and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If they refused my terms, I'd walk away with options. Better options than staying at a company that rated me a 2 out of 10 in flight risk because I'd proven I was too loyal to value properly. Henderson appeared at my door. They're ready for you. The boardroom had a different energy now. Less chaos, more control. The kind of controlled tension that came after decisions had been made and consequences accepted. Garrison was back in his seat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Webb had his legal pad covered in notes. Sarah Chen had multiple documents open on her screen. Mike, Garrison said as I sat down, we've discussed your terms. Before we respond, I need to understand something. This breach, the attackers who took our compensation data, do you have any reason to believe they plan to release it publicly? Interesting question. Very specific. They weren't asking if I could contain it or fix it. They were asking if I knew what would happen next. I have theories, I said carefully. Share them. I leaned back in my chair, taking my time. The attackers demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of our systems, but they didn't behave like typical data thieves. They didn't target customer financial data, trade secrets, or intellectual property, the information with actual market value. They targeted internal HR documents and executive communications. That's unusual unless the goal isn't theft, unless the goal is exposure. Exposure to whom? Patricia asked. Could be media, could be employees, could be competitors who'd love to poach our talent by showing them exactly how undervalued they are here. Could be activist groups who care about corporate pay equity and workplace exploitation. I shrugged. Without knowing who's behind the breach, I can't tell you their endgame. But I can tell you that if I were looking to cause maximum damage to this company with minimal legal exposure, releasing that compensation spreadsheet would be devastatingly effective. Because it shows explicit discrimination against loyal employees, Webb said quietly, because it shows that the company's stated values, loyalty, dedication, teamwork, are lies. That the actual values, the ones reflected in compensation decisions, are leverage and self-interest and the willingness to manipulate your employer by threatening to leave. Employees will see that document and understand that every speech about company culture, every talk about being a family, every assurance that hard work will be rewarded, all of it was performance. The truth is in the spreadsheet. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. They knew I was right. They knew that spreadsheet was a bomb and the fuse had been lit, and they had no idea when or where it would explode. "So can you stop it?" Garrison asked. "Can you find whoever has this data and prevent them from releasing it?" "Maybe. If I have full access to investigate, full authority to take whatever technical measures are necessary, and enough time to trace the breach back to its source. But that's a lot of ifs, and there's no guarantee of success." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should probably prepare for the possibility that this information becomes public. Have your crisis communications ready. Brief your legal team on employee lawsuits. Start thinking about how you're going to explain to your entire workforce why loyalty was penalized and threats were rewarded. Because even if I stop this particular breach, the fundamental problem isn't the data exposure. It's that the data is true." Sarah Chen closed her tablet with a decisive click. "We've reviewed your terms, Mike. Here's our counteroffer." She slid a printed document across the table toward me. A revised retention bonus of 42,000 designers, matching Jordan Mills's amount. Formal on-call compensation structure at time and a half for any after-hours work, with a monthly stipend for availability. Equity grant of 5,000 shares vesting over 3 years. And a commitment to revise the retention bonus system to base calculations on performance metrics and tenure rather than flight risk assessment. I picked up the document, skimmed it. The numbers were real, the commitments detailed, the legal language precise. It was everything I'd asked for, translated into corporate terms, and formatted with proper letterhead. It was also a trap. "And in exchange," I asked, not looking up from the document, "you use your full expertise to investigate and contain the breach. You prevent the leaked data from becoming public if possible. You help us manage the crisis if it does become public. And you never speak publicly about the retention bonus calculations, the compensation spreadsheet, or your decision not to respond Thursday night." There it was, the non-disclosure clause buried in the middle of the agreement, dressed up in language about confidentiality and proprietary information. They'd give me everything I asked for in exchange for my silence. It's about how I'd had to force them to give it to me. "You want to pay me to shut up about the fact that you only valued me properly after I stopped volunteering unpaid labor," I said. "We want to compensate you appropriately for your work," Sarah Chen corrected smoothly, "and maintain reasonable confidentiality around internal personnel decisions. Standard practice." Standard practice is doing compensation correctly in the first place, not trying to buy silence after you've been caught discriminating against your most loyal employees. Webb leaned forward. "Mike, be realistic. You're asking for substantial changes to how we operate, changes that will cost the company money and require revising policies across multiple departments. We're willing to make those changes, but we need assurances that this incident won't become a public relations nightmare. That's not unreasonable." Maybe it wasn't unreasonable from their perspective. From their perspective, this was damage control, risk mitigation, the kind of compromise that let everyone walk away with something. They'd pay me what I was worth, or at least closer to it, and I'd help them avoid a public scandal. But from my perspective, it was the same pattern repeating. The company getting caught doing something wrong and then trying to paper over it with money and NDAs. The problem addressed just enough to stop the immediate bleeding, but the underlying culture, the fundamental values, left unchanged. "I need to think about this," I said, setting the document down. "There's not much time to think," Garrison said. "Every hour this breach remains uncontained increases our risk. We need you working on this now, today, with full commitment." "Then you should have committed to valuing me properly 8 years ago instead of waiting until I had leverage." I stood up, collected my laptop. "I'll have an answer for you by end of business today. Until then, I'm taking a personal day." "You can't just," Webb started. "I'm a salaried, exempt employee taking PTO that I'm entitled to use," I interrupted. "Unless I'm suspended, which we've established you can't do without cause. So yes, I'll let Henderson know my decision by 5 p.m. I walked out before anyone could respond, past the executive assistant's desk, where a young woman stared at me with wide eyes, past the elevator where I could hear raised voices resuming behind me, down to the lobby where Marcus was back at his security desk. "Mr. Torres," he said, his face concerned. "Everything all right? You look like you've been through something." "Just a long morning, Marcus. How's Tyler's baseball going?" The normalcy of the question seemed to steady him. "Real good. He hit a grand slam Saturday. Bases loaded. Bottom of the 9th, 2 outs. You should have seen it." "I bet that was something. Tell him congratulations for me." "Will do, Mr. Torres. You take care now." I walked out into Monday morning sunshine, got into my car and sat there for a long moment, with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I pulled out my phone and sent all 5 of those recruiter emails. Available immediately. Let's talk. Emma was working from home that morning, her laptop set up at the dining room table, video call in progress with a client when I walked in. She did a double take, mouthed 5 minutes, and I nodded, went to the kitchen to make coffee. When her call ended, she came in and just looked at me. "You're home," she said. "At 10:30 on a Monday morning. Either they fired you or something very interesting happened." Something very interesting happened. I poured her coffee, added the cream and sugar in exactly the ratios she preferred, handed it to her. "They made me an offer." "What kind of offer?" I told her everything. The boardroom confrontation, the leaked compensation data, the spreadsheet that rated employees by flight risk, my ultimatum, their counteroffer with the NDA clause. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, satisfaction, and finally, concern. "So they're giving you everything you asked for," she said when I finished. "In exchange for silence about how I had to force them to give it to me. And you're considering turning it down." "I'm considering whether taking their money and signing their NDA makes me complicit in the system I'm supposedly fighting against." I sat down across from her, cradling my own coffee. "They don't want to fix the culture. They just want to contain the damage. Buy my silence, paper over this incident, and go back to operating exactly the same way until the next person figures out they're being exploited." Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications the way her legal training had taught her to do. "What happens if you turn it down?" "I walk away. Find another job. I sent out 5 applications this morning and I'll probably have interviews by Wednesday. I lose the leverage I have right now. They hire external consultants to fix the breach, and the compensation spreadsheet probably goes public because they won't have anyone who truly understands the systems trying to contain it. And if that spreadsheet goes public, the company implodes. Half the IT department quits. There are lawsuits about discriminatory compensation practices. The board might fire executive leadership. It's messy and ugly, and a lot of innocent people get hurt. Not just the executives who made the decisions, but the colleagues who depend on this job, the customers whose data might be exposed, everyone in the blast radius. So you're choosing between taking money to protect a broken system or walking away and letting that system destroy itself along with a lot of people who didn't do anything wrong. That's about the size of it." She took a long drink of her coffee, staring out the kitchen window at our backyard, where Lily's swing set sat empty in the late morning light. What does your gut tell you? My gut tells me I'm tired of being the person who fixes everything. Tired of taking responsibility for systems I didn't break, for cultures I didn't create, for compensations I didn't design. They built this house of cards over 8 years of discriminatory policies and exploitation of loyal employees. Why is it my job to prevent it from falling? Because you're a good person who doesn't want to see innocent people hurt by something you could prevent. Maybe, or maybe that's just the same pattern, me sacrificing what I want or need for the sake of others who wouldn't do the same for me. Emma reached across the table, took my hand. Mike, I've watched you agonize over this company for years, watched you give everything and get back almost nothing. And I've never said this directly because it's your career, your choice, but I need you to hear it now. You don't owe them anything. Not your expertise, not your unpaid labor, not your protection from the consequences of their own decisions. Whatever you choose it for yourself, not because you feel obligated to save people who never valued you properly. Her words settled into my chest, heavy and true. She was right. I knew she was right. But there was a difference between knowing something intellectually and being able to act on it emotionally. I said slowly, I need to talk to one more person before I decide. Who? Your father. Emma's eyebrows shot up. My father? The man who told you to appreciate the gesture and be grateful for scraps? That's who you want advice from? Not advice, clarity. He had lunch with Garrison Friday. He's part of their network, their world. He called me Saturday to tell me I was damaging the family reputation. I need to understand if he was speaking for himself or as Garrison's proxy. I need to know if he's been coaching them on how to handle me. You think Dad is involved in this? In their crisis response? I think Morrison, Webb, and Chen is one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, and I think when companies face catastrophic liability exposure, they call lawyers they trust. I think it's interesting that Webb in that boardroom seemed to know exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to frame the NDA clause, exactly how to make their offer sound reasonable. Professional behavior, sure, but maybe professionally coached by someone who knows me, who knows what I care about, who knows my vulnerabilities. Emma's face had gone pale. If Dad is giving them legal advice on how to handle you, on how to leverage your sense of responsibility to get you to sign their NDA, Mike, that's such a massive conflict of interest. I'm his daughter. You're his son-in-law. How could he? Because to him, this is business. Companies are more important than individuals. Reputations matter more than justice. And loyalty, the kind that's about protecting the powerful, not rewarding the faithful. That's the only loyalty that counts in his world. She pulled her hand back, stood up, started pacing. I recognized the movement. It was what she did when she was angry and trying to think through something complicated. If you're right, if he's involved, then he's been working against you this whole time. The lecture about appreciating the gesture, the call Saturday about being a team player, all of it calculated to keep you compliant. Maybe. Or maybe he genuinely believes that's how the world works, and he's trying to teach me the rules. Either way, I need to know. What are you going to do? Call him and ask? No, I'm going to his office this afternoon, and I'm going to make him tell me the truth. Emma stopped pacing, looked at me with an expression somewhere between pride and worry. Mike, if you confront him and he is involved, you're burning that bridge completely. He's my father. That's Lily's grandfather. I know, and I'm sorry, but I can't make this decision without understanding all the pieces. If David is part of their strategy, if he's been coaching them on how to handle me, then that changes everything about what this offer means. She came back to the table, sat down, took both my hands in hers. Okay, go talk to him. Get your answers. And Mike, she squeezed hard, Whatever you decide after that, I'm with you. If you take their offer, if you walk away, if you burn everything down on your way out the door, I'm with you. We'll figure it out together." I leaned across the table and kissed her, tasting coffee and support and the kind of partnership that made the past 8 years of struggling feel like preparation for this moment. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For being the thing they couldn't compensate me for, the thing that actually matters." She smiled, squeezed my hands once more, then let go. "Go get your answers. I'll be here when you get back." I stood up, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Morrison, Webb, and Chen had offices downtown in one of those gleaming towers that existed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. David would be there, in his corner office with his mahogany desk and his wall of legal credentials. And in about 45 minutes, we were going to have a very interesting conversation about loyalty and leverage and whose side he was really on. Morrison, Webb, and Chen occupied floors 32 through 35 of the Sentinel Tower, downtown's second tallest building, the kind of real estate that costs more per square foot than most people's annual salaries. I'd been here before: holiday parties, family celebrations, the occasional lunch when David wanted to show off his domain, but never like this. Never walking through the marble lobby with purpose hardening my spine. Never riding the elevator up with my jaw clenched and my hands steady despite the adrenaline singing through my veins. The receptionist on the 34th floor recognized me immediately. "Mr. Torres." "What a nice surprise. Are you here to see Mr. Morrison?" "Is he available?" She checked her computer, her professional smile never wavering. "He's between meetings right now, actually. Let me just—" "Don't announce me," I said, "and I know where his office is." Something in my tone made her hesitate, her fingers frozen above her phone. "I really should let him know you're—" "It's family business," I said, already moving past her desk. "He'll want to see me." I walked through the hallways lined with portraits of founding partners, past conference rooms where young associates worked in clusters, around corners I'd navigated a dozen times before. David's office was at the far end, corner location with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of view that came with 40 years of partnership and a reputation that opened doors. His door was half open. Through the gap, I could see him at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, papers spread in front of him. He looked exactly as he always did, composed, authoritative, in complete control of his environment. I knocked once and walked in without waiting for permission. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his professional mask. "Michael, this is unexpected. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled." We didn't. I closed the door behind me, noting the way his eyes tracked the movement. "But we need to have a conversation. About Garrison. About your lunch with him Friday. About the legal advice you've been providing to my employer." His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "I have lunch with many people, Michael. James is an old friend. We discuss many things." "Did you discuss me? Did you discuss how to handle their lead systems architect who'd become inconveniently unwilling to volunteer unpaid labor?" "Michael, sit down. You're being dramatic. I'm being clear, and I'll stand, thanks." I moved closer to his desk, close enough to see the documents he'd been reviewing. Legal briefs, dense with case citations and statutory references. "You called me Saturday night, told me I was damaging the family reputation by not being a team player during a crisis. How did you know about the crisis, David? How did you know the details of a security breach that hadn't been made public? How did you know my company's internal personnel situation unless someone told you? James mentioned they were dealing with a security incident. He was concerned about. He told you I was unreachable during the breach. He told you I'd been difficult, and you called me to straighten me out, to remind me of my professional obligations, to make sure I fell back in line like a good employee who knows his place." I leaned forward, hands flat on his desk. That wasn't a social call from a concerned father-in-law. That was a strategic intervention coordinated with my CEO to ensure compliance. So, I'll ask you again, what legal advice have you been providing to my employer? David set down his reading glasses slowly, deliberately, the gesture of a man buying time to formulate his response. When he spoke, his voice had the measured quality of someone choosing words very carefully. I am not at liberty to discuss any legal counsel I may or may not provide to any client. Attorney-client privilege protects those communications, as you well know from our family discussions about my work. Attorney-client privilege. So you admit Garrison is a client. I admit nothing except that I maintain confidentiality around my professional activities, just as you should maintain confidentiality around yours. Is that what this morning's NDA clause was about? Your work? Your suggestions about how to contain someone who'd become inconvenient? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't know what you're referring to. They made me an offer this morning. Revised compensation, formal on-call structure, equity grant, everything I asked for, in exchange for my help containing the breach and my permanent silence about the events that led to the breach. Standard practice, your colleague Webb called it. But the language was very specific, very precise, the kind of language that comes from lawyers who know exactly what they're protecting against. Lawyers who understand not just the legal exposure, but the personal leverage points. I straightened up, crossing my arms. The NDA clause specifically prohibits me from discussing retention bonus calculations, compensation spreadsheets, or my decision not to respond Thursday night. Those three things, explicitly named. Which is interesting because I only told them about the first two this morning in the boardroom. The third thing, my decision not to respond, that was just between me and Henderson until Saturday, when you called to lecture me about being a team player. So either you're psychic or someone briefed you on exactly what needed to be protected in that NDA. David stood up, moving to the window with his hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a man preparing to deliver a verdict. You're making accusations based on speculation and connecting dots that may not actually be connected. That's not evidence, Michael. That's conspiracy theory. Is it? Then explain how you knew the specific details of my absence during the breach. Explain why you felt compelled to call me Saturday night, during what should have been my personal time, to discuss my professional obligations. Explain why the NDA I received this morning reads like it was drafted by someone with intimate knowledge of the situation. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city below. 40 stories up, the world looked clean and ordered from here. No mess, no complexity, just the neat geometry of streets and buildings arranged in sensible patterns. But that was an illusion, wasn't it? The mess was still there. You just couldn't see it from this distance. Let me tell you a story, David said finally, not turning around. 30 years ago, I represented a client, a mid-sized tech company not unlike the one you work for. They had an engineer, brilliant man, absolutely critical to their operations. He felt undervalued, underappreciated, started making demands, threatening to leave, holding the company hostage with his specialized knowledge. They came to me asking how to handle him. What did you tell them? I told them to meet his demands in exchange for an airtight confidentiality agreement. Give him what he wanted, protect their interests, move forward. Standard practice. He turned around now, facing me. Do you know what happened to that engineer? Tell me. He took the deal, signed the NDA, got his money and his recognition, and within 2 years he was gone anyway, hired away by a competitor for even more money. Because once you teach someone that leverage is the only currency that matters, they become very good at using it. The company he left struggled without him, had to rebuild systems, retrain staff, lost competitive advantage. It cost them millions. What's your point? My point is that the way you're behaving right now, holding your knowledge hostage, demanding concessions, threatening to let the systems fail. You think you're standing up for yourself. You think you're finally getting what you deserve. But what you're really doing is proving that you can't be trusted, that you'll weaponize your position whenever you feel slighted. And companies don't reward that behavior long-term, Michael. They contain it. The words landed like stones, heavy and deliberate. This was the truth then, not just legal advice, coaching, strategy. David had been part of this from the beginning, helping Garrison and his team understand not just the legal landscape, but the psychological one. How to manage me, how to control me, how to get what they needed while minimizing their costs. "So you did tell them how to handle me," I said quietly. I told a friend how complex employment situations are typically managed in a way that protects both parties' interests. That's what lawyers do, Michael. We solve problems. By treating people like problems that need solving instead of humans who deserve respect. By recognizing that emotions cloud judgment and that sometimes people need help seeing the bigger picture. He moved back to his desk, sat down, resumed his position of authority. "You're angry about your bonus. I understand that. You feel undervalued. I sympathize. But you're letting that anger drive you toward decisions that will hurt your career, your reputation, your family's stability. Emma and Lily depend on your income, on your benefits. Is your pride really worth jeopardizing that?" This isn't about pride. It's about principle. Principles don't pay the mortgage, Michael. Principles don't fund Lily's college education. Principles don't provide the comfortable life you've built for your family. He leaned forward, his expression earnest now, the concerned father-in-law replacing the corporate lawyer. "Take the deal. Take the money, sign the NDA, go back to being the talented, valuable employee you've always been. In 5 years, this will be a minor blip. You'll have moved up, earned more increases, maybe even gotten promoted. But only if you show them you can be trusted now. Only if you prove you're not going to hold the company hostage every time you're dissatisfied." I thought about the recruiter emails I'd sent that morning, the responses that were probably already waiting in my inbox, the other opportunities, the other companies, the other possibilities that existed outside this room and that boardroom, and the entire tangled web of obligation and manipulation that had defined my career for 8 years. "You're right about one thing," I said. "Emotions do cloud judgment, but not the way you think. My anger isn't clouding my judgment, it's clarifying it. For 8 years, I let my dedication, my loyalty, my commitment to excellence cloud my judgment. I told myself that good work would be rewarded, that sacrifice would be recognized, that staying and building something meaningful was more valuable than jumping ship for money. And you know what that got me? Michael, $4,500. That's what 8 years of cloudless judgment earned me. Meanwhile, Jordan Mills, who I trained, who learned everything from me, got $42,000 because he was smart enough to let emotions cloud his judgment. Smart enough to get angry, to pursue other options, to create leverage. My clarity was my weakness. His anger was his strength. David's face had taken on a stern expression, the one I'd seen him use in family dinners when someone said something he considered naive or foolish. "You're conflating tactical negotiation with emotional volatility. They're not the same thing." "Aren't they? You just told me that demanding concessions and threatening to leave makes companies not trust you. But isn't that exactly what Jordan did? And he got rewarded for it. So which is it, David? Is leverage smart business, or is it proof of untrustworthiness? Or does it depend on whether you're the one with the leverage or the one trying to contain someone else's?" He didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, I saw something I'd never seen before in my father-in-law. Uncertainty. Just a flicker, quickly suppressed, but real. The confident attorney, the senior partner who always knew the right move, suddenly confronted with the contradiction in his own logic. "The difference," he said finally, is that Jordan was willing to leave. His leverage was real. He had another offer, another option. What you have is the ability to let a breach continue, to withhold your expertise, to damage the company that employs you. That's not leverage. That's hostage-taking. Or it's finally understanding my value, finally recognizing that my willingness to always say yes, to always sacrifice, to always put the company first, that wasn't dedication. That was making myself worthless by proving I'd work for any price. Jordan understood that the only way to be valued is to demonstrate you won't accept undervaluation. I'm just learning that lesson 8 years later than I should have. I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. One more question. When you called me Saturday, when you told me I was damaging the family reputation, whose reputation were you really worried about? Mine or yours, with clients like Garrison who expect their lawyers' family members to fall in line? David stood up, his face flushing. That's unfair, Michael. I've always supported you, welcomed you into this family, helped you with what? With learning to appreciate gestures, with understanding my place, with being grateful for whatever scraps the powerful decide to throw my way. I shook my head. You taught me a lot, David. But the most valuable lesson wasn't the one you meant to teach. You taught me that in your world, the only relationships that matter are the ones between people with power. Everyone else, employees, family members, anyone without leverage, we're just pieces on the board to be moved around as needed. If you walk out of here, if you turn down their offer and burn these bridges, you'll regret it, he said, his voice hard now. I've seen it before. People who think they're standing on principle, making brave stands, holding lines. They end up bitter and broke and wondering why their righteousness didn't pay the bills. Maybe. Or maybe they end up free from jobs that exploit them, from relationships built on manipulation, from the constant calculation of who owes what to whom. I opened the door. Thanks for the conversation, David. It helped clarify things. What are you going to do? I'm going to make a decision based on what's right for me and my family, not what's right for Garrison, or for you, or for the company that spent 8 years teaching me my loyalty was worthless. Just me. Emma will be disappointed. Emma already knows I'm here. She sent me, actually. Told me to get answers, to understand all the pieces before I decided. She'll support whatever I choose, because unlike you, unlike Garrison, unlike everyone in that boardroom this morning, she actually values me for more than what I can do for her. I stepped into the hallway, leaving David standing at his desk with his papers and his view and his 40 years of practiced manipulation. The receptionist looked up as I passed, her professional smile faltering when she saw my face. Is everything all right, Mr. Torres? Everything's fine, I said. Actually, everything's clearer than it's been in years. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up, lighter somehow, like I'd left something heavy in that corner office and didn't need to carry it anymore. The weight of expectation, maybe. Or the burden of believing that people who treated me like a problem to solve actually had my best interests at heart. In my car, I checked my phone. 3 responses from recruiters already. All 3 wanted to schedule interviews this week. All 3 mentioned compensation packages that made my current salary look like the undervaluation it was. I also had a text from Emma. How did it go? I typed back. He's been coaching them. Probably drafted the NDA. Definitely called me Saturday to keep me compliant. Everything we suspected. Her response came immediately. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Yeah. Actually, I think I am. Coming home now. Need to make some calls. I love you. Love you too. More than I can explain. I started the car and pulled out of the parking garage into midday traffic. Somewhere above me, David was probably calling Garrison, reporting on our conversation, strategizing about containment and damage control, and how to handle an employee who'd finally figured out the game. But I wasn't an employee anymore. Not really. I was a person with options, with leverage, with the clarity to see that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who only value you when you're useful. By the time I got home, I knew what I was going to tell Henderson by 5 p.m., and it wasn't what anyone expected. Emma was in the kitchen when I got home, making sandwiches, even though it was barely noon. Comfort food, I realized. She knew I'd need to process what I'd learned, and her way of helping was practical, tangible, nurturing. The smell of grilled cheese filled the house, butter and bread and melted cheddar, the kind of simple pleasure that grounded you when everything else felt uncertain. "Sit," she said when she saw me. "Eat, then talk." I sat. I ate. The sandwich was perfect, crispy and warm and exactly what I needed. Emma sat across from me with her own plate, not eating, just watching me with that particular intensity that meant she was reading everything I wasn't saying out loud. "He was involved," I said finally. "Not just casual advice, strategic coaching. He helped them understand how to frame the offer, how to position the NDA, probably how to handle me in that boardroom meeting. Everything calculated to get maximum compliance for minimum cost." Jesus. She set down her sandwich, appetite apparently gone. "My own father, working against you, against us. In his mind, he's not working against us. He's being practical, protecting relationships that matter to him, corporate clients, business connections, the network that's defined his career. We're just peripheral. Family is family, but business is business, and when the two conflict, business wins." That's such bullshit. It's his truth. Has been for 40 years. Why would it change now? I took another bite, chewed slowly, thinking through everything David had said and not said. He told me a story about an engineer who made demands, got what he wanted, signed an NDA, and left 2 years later anyway. The company struggled without him. David presented it as a cautionary tale, proof that leverage and demands make you untrustworthy. But I think it was actually a different kind of warning. He was telling me that even if I take their offer, even if I sign their NDA and go back to being a compliant employee, they'll never trust me again. They'll be looking to replace me, to reduce their dependency on me, to make sure I can't hold them hostage a second time. The NDA isn't just about protecting them from public exposure. It's about buying time to make me obsolete. Emma's eyes widened. So taking the offer means accepting money to stay in a job where they're actively planning to push you out. Exactly. And refusing the offer means walking away with nothing while they scramble to contain the breach themselves, probably fail, and watch their compensation practices become public knowledge anyway. Either choice benefits them more than it benefits me. So what's the third option? I looked at her across the table. This woman who'd married me 12 years ago when I was just starting my career, who'd supported every move and sacrifice, who'd raised our daughter while I worked late and missed recitals and prioritized a company that paid me $4,500 to appreciate the gesture. She deserved better than watching me choose between two bad options. I make them an offer, I said, on my terms, not theirs. What kind of offer? I pulled out my phone, opened the recruiter emails, showed her the responses. I have 3 interviews scheduled for this week. 2 of them are with companies that would pay me 50 to 60% more than I make now, with equity and real benefits and actual respect for work-life balance. I could have a new job by Friday if I wanted. So I go to Henderson this afternoon, and I tell him exactly that. You're using their tactic, creating leverage. I'm recognizing my worth. There's a difference. Jordan got $42,000 because he had another offer. I'm not getting fair compensation for the same reason because I didn't have other offers. So I'm fixing that problem. I'm going in with real options, real alternatives, and I'm telling them what it will actually cost to keep me. And if they refuse, if they call your bluff, it's not a bluff. If they refuse, I walk. I take one of these other jobs, I leave them to deal with the breach on their own, and I let the compensation spreadsheet become public or not, depending on whether their external consultants can figure out what I built. Either way, I'm free of a company that spent 8 years undervaluing me. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, what about David? What about the family dynamics, the awkwardness at holidays, all of that? David made his choice when he decided to coach my employer on how to manipulate me. I'm making mine now. If that makes family gatherings uncomfortable, we'll deal with it. But I'm not going to let his priorities dictate mine anymore. She reached across the table, took my hand. Okay, so what's your actual offer? What are you asking for? I'd been thinking about this since I left David's office, running calculations in my head, weighing what was fair against what was possible. Salary increased to market rate, probably 40% higher than current. That's not a reward, that's correction. They've been underpaying me for years. Retention bonus matching Jordan's isn't enough. I want double. 84,000 because I've been here 4 times as long and I built the systems he learned to maintain. That's aggressive. That's fair. But here's the part they won't like. I want the retention bonus structure officially changed. Not just promised, actually implemented. Based on tenure and contribution, not flight risk. And I want the existing compensation spreadsheet destroyed. Not just hidden, actually deleted from all systems, with verification from an independent auditor. Emma's eyebrows shot up. You're asking them to destroy evidence of their discriminatory practices. I'm asking them to fix a broken system. That spreadsheet is toxic. It shouldn't exist. Getting rid of it protects them from liability, sure, but it also protects every other employee from being judged by how likely they are to leave rather than how valuable they are. Win-win. And the breach? Your cooperation containing it? I'll help. Full cooperation, full expertise, everything they need to trace the attack and prevent future incidents. But not under an NDA that prohibits me from ever discussing what happened. Instead, I want a mutual confidentiality agreement that protects legitimately proprietary information while allowing me to discuss my own experiences and decisions. They don't get to buy my permanent silence. They get my professional discretion in exchange for professional treatment. She was smiling now, a fierce expression of pride and satisfaction. You've thought this through. I had a 45-minute drive to think about what I actually want versus what they're willing to give me. Turns out those are different things. I squeezed her hand. If they accept, I stay. I help fix the breach. I help rebuild trust. I try to make the company better from the inside. If they refuse, I leave with 3 solid job offers and the knowledge that I finally stood up for myself. Either way, I win. Either way, we win, she corrected. Whatever happens, Mike, we'll be fine. Better than fine. Because you're finally choosing yourself instead of hoping someone else will choose to value you. We finished lunch in comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who've made a decision and are at peace with it. Around 1:30, I went to my home office and started preparing. Not a presentation, not a negotiation deck, just clarity. A 1-page document outlining my terms, specific and numbered and non-negotiable. Everything I wanted, nothing I didn't. At 3 p.m., I called Henderson. Mike. He answered on the first ring, his voice tense. Please tell me you're calling with good news. I'm calling with a counteroffer. I need you to get Garrison, Sarah Chen, and whoever else needs to be in the room. I'll be there at 4:30. Mike, they gave you everything you asked for this morning. What more? They gave me what they thought would make me compliant. That's different from what I actually need. 4:30, Henderson. Make sure the right people are there. I ended the call before he could argue, then spent the next hour doing something I should have done years ago. I documented everything. Every late night, every missed family event, every weekend spent on my laptop, while Emma and Lily went to the beach without me. Every emergency I'd responded to, every crisis I'd solved, every time I'd prioritized work over life because I believed that dedication would be rewarded. 8 years of sacrifices, compiled into a simple spreadsheet with dates and times and brief descriptions. Not for them. They didn't deserve my history. For me. Evidence that my anger wasn't irrational, that my demands weren't unreasonable, that what I was asking for was actually less than what I'd earned. At 4 p.m., I changed into my best suit, the charcoal one I wore to important meetings with the silk tie Emma had bought me for our 10th anniversary. If I was going to negotiate my worth, I was going to look like someone whose worth was negotiable at the level I was proposing. Emma kissed me at the door. Go get what you deserve. I will, one way or another. The boardroom at 4:30 looked different than it had at 8 a.m. Less crowded, more intimate. Just 4 people. Garrison, Sarah Chen, Henderson, and Marcus Webb. The board members were gone. The consultants dismissed. This was the inner circle. The decision makers. The people who actually controlled what happened next. They looked exhausted. Garrison's tie was loosened. Sarah's perfect hair showed signs of stress running fingers through it. Henderson had dark circles under his eyes. Webb was the only one who looked composed, but his legal pad was covered in notes, probably from consultations with David, probably outlining strategies for handling me. Mike, Garrison said as I entered, Henderson said you had a counteroffer. We're listening. I set my laptop on the table but didn't open it. Instead, I pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across to Garrison. These are my terms, not negotiable, not flexible. Take them or I'm walking. Garrison picked up the paper, scanned it, his expression darkening as he read. He passed it to Sarah, who read it and passed it to Webb. Henderson leaned over to read over Webb's shoulder, his face going pale. This is, Sarah started, then stopped. Mike, this is more than double what we offered this morning. The salary increase brings me to market rate. The retention bonus reflects my actual value and tenure. The structural changes protect all employees, not just me. And the confidentiality agreement respects my right to discuss my own professional experiences while protecting your legitimate business interests. It's all reasonable. Reasonable. Webb's voice was sharp. You're asking for nearly $200,000 in immediate compensation, plus structural changes that would affect our entire personnel management system. That's not reasonable. That's extortion. No, extortion would be demanding money to prevent harm. I'm offering services in exchange for compensation. That's called employment. I leaned back in my chair, projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. You need me to contain the breach, to prevent your compensation practices from becoming public, to help rebuild the security infrastructure. I need to be compensated fairly for that work. These numbers reflect fair compensation. They reflect spite, Garrison said flatly. You're angry about your bonus, so you're punishing us by making demands you know we can't meet. Can't meet or won't meet, because I have 3 companies willing to meet similar terms. I can show you the emails if you'd like. Interviews scheduled this week, offers probable by Friday. So when you say you can't meet these terms, what you mean is you won't, which is fine. That's your choice. But then I exercise my choice, which is to work somewhere that values me appropriately. The room went silent. This was different from this morning, and they all knew it. This morning I'd been angry, reactive, making demands from a place of emotion. Now I was calm, prepared, operating from a position of actual leverage rather than just threatened withdrawal. Sarah Chen pulled out her tablet, started running calculations. The immediate costs are manageable, high, but manageable. It's the structural changes that create problems. Revising the retention bonus system affects everyone, not just IT. We'd need to implement similar changes across all departments or risk discrimination claims from other areas. That's potentially millions in additional compensation. Or, I said, you stop discriminating based on flight risk. and start compensating based on actual value, which is what you should have been doing all along. The cost of fixing a broken system isn't my problem. It's the cost of having broken the system in the first place. Henderson spoke for the first time. Mike, even if we wanted to agree to this, the timeline is impossible. These kinds of structural changes require board approval, legal review, HR policy revisions. It would take months. Then give me a commitment in writing signed by Garrison and the board chair that the changes will be implemented within 6 months with independent verification. I'll help contain the breach now in exchange for that commitment. My immediate compensation is separate. That happens this week, or I'm gone. Webb was shaking his head. The confidentiality agreement you're proposing is unworkable. We need protection against you discussing internal personnel decisions, compensation practices, the circumstances of the breach. You need protection against me telling the truth. I interrupted. That's what you're actually saying. You want to pay me to never discuss how I was undervalued, how the bonus system discriminates against loyal employees, how I chose not to respond to an emergency because years of dedication had bought me nothing. But I'm not selling my truth. I'm offering a professional discretion in exchange for professional treatment. That's semantics, Webb said coldly. No, that's the difference between employment and ownership. You employed me for 8 years. You don't own my experiences, my story, or my right to discuss how I was treated. If you want my help now, you get it under terms that respect my autonomy. If that's unacceptable, then we're done here. I stood up, collected my paper, closed my laptop. I'm giving you until 5 p.m., 30 minutes from now. Accept my terms in writing, with signatures from Garrison and Sarah Chen, or I'm accepting a position elsewhere. Henderson has my personal email. Send the agreement there if you want me to stay. Otherwise, consider this my 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. Mike, wait. Garrison stood up, hands raised in a placating gesture. Don't be rash. These are big decisions, significant commitments. We need time to discuss, to consult. You've had all day to discuss. You've consulted with your lawyers, including David Morrison, my father-in-law, who's apparently been coaching you on how to handle me since Friday. You've had time. What you haven't had is urgency, because you assumed I'd eventually cave, eventually accept whatever you offered, eventually prove that my loyalty made me cheap. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm the person with 3 other job offers who knows his worth. 30 minutes, gentlemen. Choose wisely. I walked out before anyone could respond, before Garrison could try another angle, before Webb could threaten legal action, before Henderson could appeal to our 8 years of working relationship. Down the elevator, through the lobby where Marcus looked up with concern, out to my car where I sat in the driver's seat and let myself shake for just a moment. This was it, the inflection point. The moment where everything changed, or everything ended. In either way, I'd never be the same person who'd walked into this building 8 years ago believing that dedication would be rewarded. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. How'd it go? Made my offer. Gave them until 5 p.m. Now we wait. Proud of you. Whatever happens. Love you. Love you more. Come home soon. I checked my email. 4:37 p.m., 23 minutes until my deadline. 23 minutes for them to decide if I was worth what I'd asked for, or if they'd rather scramble to contain a breach without me, restructure security without my knowledge, and hope that the compensation spreadsheet never became public. 23 minutes that would determine the next chapter of my career, my life, my story. I put the car in drive and headed home. Whatever they decided, whatever they sent or didn't send, I'd face it with Emma beside me, in the knowledge that I'd finally stood up for myself. The sun was starting its descent toward evening, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Friday's crisis felt like it had happened months ago instead of days. So much had changed. So much had become clear. My phone dinged at 4:51 p.m., An email from Henderson's official work address. Subject line: Terms of employment, Michael Torres. I pulled over into a parking lot, hands steady despite the adrenaline, and opened it. The attachment was a PDF. 3 pages, official letterhead, signatures from Garrison and Sarah Chen already affixed. I started reading, and with each paragraph, something tight in my chest began to loosen. They'd agreed to everything. The document was everything I'd asked for, translated into legal language but unmistakably complete. Salary increased to market rate, 40%, effective immediately. Retention bonus of $84,000, payable within 30 days. Formal on-call compensation structure at time and a half, with monthly availability stipend. 5,000 shares of equity, 3-year vesting schedule. But that was just the money. The real victory was in Section 3. Company commits to implementing revised retention bonus structure based on tenure, performance metrics, and demonstrated value rather than flight risk assessment. Implementation timeline: 6 months from execution of this agreement. Independent HR audit to verify compliance. Existing flight risk assessment documentation to be destroyed under supervision of external auditor within 90 days. They were dismantling the system, actually dismantling it, not just for me, for everyone. The confidentiality clause was clean, reasonable, mutual. I could discuss my professional experiences and decisions. They could protect proprietary information and trade secrets. Neither party could disparage the other. Standard, fair, respectful. I sat in my car reading it 3 times, looking for traps, for hidden clauses, for the catch that would turn victory into defeat. But it wasn't there. This was real. They'd met my terms. All of them. My phone rang. Henderson. "Did you get it?" he asked without preamble. I got it. And I thought about making him wait, about drawing out the moment, about exercising the power I'd finally claimed. But Henderson had always been fair to me, within the constraints of a broken system. He'd fought for me even when his fights didn't win. He deserved a straight answer. "I'll sign it. Send me the DocuSign link." His exhale was audible. "Thank you, Mike. I know it's been complicated, but I'm glad you're staying. We need you. I need you. You'll have me, on these terms, nothing less going forward." "I understand. I'll send the link now. Can you start on the breach analysis tomorrow?" "I'll start tonight, from home. I'll have a preliminary report by morning." I paused. "Henderson, one more thing. Jordan and the rest of the team, they're going to hear about this, about my new compensation. Make sure they understand it's not about favoritism. It's about correcting an injustice. And make sure they know the new retention system will treat them fairly too." "I will. Mike, thank you for not walking away, for giving us a chance to do better." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 6 months when the new system is actually implemented and everyone's being valued properly." I ended the call and just sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. I'd done it. I'd stood up, made demands, refused to back down, and won. Not just money, not just recognition, actual systemic change. I called Emma. "They agreed," I said when she answered. "To everything." Her scream of joy was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Come home," she said when she could speak again. "We're celebrating. I'm calling Lily's friend's mom to bring her home early. This is a family moment." "I'll be there in 10 minutes. I started the car and headed home, toward my family, toward the life I'd almost sacrificed for a company that hadn't valued me. But that was changing now. Everything was changing now. 3 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where everything had changed, but this time the energy was different, collaborative, almost respectful. The breach investigation had taken 6 weeks. I'd traced the attack back to its source, not foreign hackers or criminal organizations, but a former employee who'd been let go 2 years earlier. Someone who'd felt undervalued, who'd kept their access credentials. who'd waited for the perfect moment to expose the company's practices. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. We'd contained it. The compensation spreadsheet never went public, but the company knew how close they'd come. The new retention system goes live next week, Sarah Chen was saying, pulling up slides that showed the revised structure. Merit-based, tenure-weighted, transparent. HR has completed training. Every employee will receive documentation explaining how bonuses are calculated going forward. Jordan caught my eye from across the table and nodded. He'd gotten an adjustment too, not as large as mine, but fair, based on his actual contributions, not on threats to leave. He'd thanked me afterward, said he finally understood what I'd been fighting for. The meeting ended. Henderson walked me out. "The board approved your promotion," he said casually. "Director of Security Architecture. Comes with another equity grant and your own team. You've earned it." I had earned it, but more importantly, I'd stopped waiting for others to recognize that. That evening, Emma and I sat on the back porch while Lily practiced piano inside. The notes of Claire de Lune drifted through the open window, more confident now than 3 months ago. "Your father called today," Emma said quietly. "Wants to have dinner. Said he has something to discuss." "What did you tell him?" "That we'd think about it. That forgiveness takes time." David had sent a letter 2 weeks after my negotiation. Not quite an apology. He was too proud for that, but an acknowledgement that he'd perhaps prioritized professional obligations over family considerations. Close enough. "Maybe eventually," I said. "When he understands that our relationship isn't transactional, that family shouldn't require leverage." Emma leaned against me. "You know what Lily asked me yesterday? She asked why you're home for dinner now, why you come to her recitals, why you're not always on your computer." "What did you tell her?" "That Daddy learned something important. That sometimes you have to stop giving everything away to realize what you're worth." Inside, Lily finished her piece. The final notes hung in the evening air like a question answered. I thought about that email from Tuesday, the one with 40,500 that had seemed like an ending, but turned out to be a beginning. The moment when everything I'd believed about loyalty and dedication had shattered, revealing something truer underneath. Your value isn't what others decide to pay you. It's what you decide you won't work for less than. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all, until you're ready to do everything differently. "Come on," Emma said, standing and pulling me up. "Lily wants to show you a new piece she's learning. Something about being present for the people who matter." I followed her inside, toward the music, toward my daughter, toward the life I'd finally chosen over a job that had never chosen me. The gesture I'd learned was only worth appreciating when it matched the sacrifice. Everything else was just mathematics dressed up as gratitude.